Chapter 229. Mu Shuetong and the little princess Han Yinming had different thoughts. Both of them were happy for Jun Wui and his sister, Han Yinyao. The two of them had been separated for 10 years and had suffered for 10 years. Now that they had the help of such a strong person, they believed that it was only a matter of time before they were reunited. How could they not be happy? Upon returning to the magnificent jewel hall, the first thing that the third elder did was to write a long letter detailing all the events that had transpired over the past few days, regardless of whether it was a big or a small matter. Moreover, he emphasized his own opinions on the solitary falcon's appearance and the mysterious expert, and tactfully put forward his own opinions on the matter. After writing a dozen or so pages, the third elder released the eagle, and then stood alone on the roof of the magnificent jewel hall and silently looked at the gloomy sky. The more he looked, the more he felt that a storm was coming, and couldn't help but sigh endlessly. If this storm were to break out, who knows how many people would die a violent death, especially now that there was the Silver Blizzard City's Shao family's soul-replenishing jade. This was a treasure that absolutely could not be lost. The Shao family would take it back at all costs. However, this piece of jade was in the hands of the mysterious black masked man. How could they take it back? Even if they could take it back, the entire Silver Blizzard City would have to face off against such a strong person, and it would certainly be a situation of mutual destruction. In the end, how many people would be left alive? At the same time, two more eagles soared into the sky and flew towards the Silver Blizzard City. These were the little princess and Mu Shuetong's information, and they were both sent to the same person, Han Yinyao. That beautiful and pitiful girl had sacrificed her youth in exchange for the existence of the Jun family. Who knew how excited she would be when she received the news of her beloved? What? Xiao Han's angry roar came from below. Jun Wui's poison is healed? How is this possible? How can he be healed? Bastard! I will not allow it. The third elder closed his eyes. Xiao Han, it was because of you that year. What are you going to do now? As the curtain of night fell, the Tianxiang City's #1 gang, the Jinyang gang, started to gather their men from all directions and started to rush towards the headquarters. Previously, the headquarters of the Jinyang gang had issued a general summoning order. Golden Sun illuminates the world, which only the gang leader had the right to issue. Not only was this order something that only the gang leader had the right to issue, it also meant that the Jinyang gang was facing a critical moment of life and death. This was the first time that the Jinyang gang had issued a general summoning order. Even when the headquarters was almost destroyed by the unfathomably powerful eagle-nosed elder, it was not issued. It wasn't that Jin Fenglai didn't want to issue the summon order, but the old man's strength was too terrifying. It wasn't something that could be dealt with using numbers. Even if he released the token, the result wouldn't change. It was better to just look for his brother Hai. However, things were different now. A blue-clothed man was standing there with his hands behind his back. He looked as calm as the ocean and as motionless as a mountain. He had the aura of a powerful master, and his whole body gave off the aura of surging ocean. It seemed that he was quietly waiting for the arrival of the Jinyang gang. The leader of the Jinyang gang, Jin Fenglai, was sitting on one side with a serious expression on his face. He could feel that his brother and benefactor had changed a lot, whether it was his attitude or his demeanor. He was brimming with a domineering aura and a desire to control. This was completely different from his previous attitude of being completely indifferent to the worldly affairs of the mortal world. Perhaps the Jinyang gang would change in the hands of his brother Hai. If this wasn't the case, why would he issue the Golden Sun illuminates the world summon order? Seeing that the Jinyang gang's 4 hall masters and 12 branch lords had arrived, Jin Fenglai stood up and clapped his hands a few times. The crowd suddenly quieted down, and everyone looked at him, waiting for him to speak. Today, I have issued a general summoning order to gather all my brothers here. I have an important announcement to make. Jin Fenglai's cold eyes slowly swept over everyone's faces. From today onwards, our Jinyang gang will welcome our new leader. This is also the first step towards unifying Tianxiang's underworld. Everyone knows Hai Chen Feng, so I won't introduce him. Originally, Hai Chen Feng and I were inseparable, and his position in the Jin Yang gang is transcendent. But from today onwards, Hai Chen Feng will take a step forward and become the leader of the Jin Yang gang. As for me, I will step down and become the first protector. As soon as these words were spoken, the crowd became deathly silent. Jin Feng quietly waited for a while after he had finished his announcement, and seeing that no one had responded, he slowly opened his mouth. I don't know if any of you brothers have any different opinions. Hai Chen Feng was still standing with his hands behind his back as he spoke, and his eyes were fixated on the row of memorial tablets on the incense table in front of him. These people were the founders of the Jin Yang gang, and now they have all become memorial tablets. I have an opinion. A burly man stepped out from the crowd. I don't know why elder brother has made this decision. Brother Hai's martial arts are peerless, and his skills are superb. We admire him, but becoming the leader of a gang isn't something that can be done with just martial arts. Isn't it better to be a guest of the gang like before? Why do you have to carry out such a solemn transfer of power? To put it bluntly, Brother Hai's position in the gang is transcendent, and his authority is even greater than that of the gang's leader. Why do you have to go through so much trouble to become the leader? At present, the capital is filled with experts from all over the world, and it can be said that a storm is brewing. The major families are also getting restless and have already asked us to attach ourselves to them. The Morong family, the Li family, and the Song family. Lord Luo, in your opinion, if I become the leader of the gang, how far will I be able to take everyone? We can't afford to provoke any of these families. The Jinyang gang is the #1 gang in Tianxiang City, but any one of these families has the ability to destroy the Jinyang gang in the blink of an eye. What can I do for the future? Jin Feng sighed. I can't afford to provoke them, but there are others who can. Brother Hai is fully capable of shouldering this heavy responsibility and can even lead our brothers. We don't need to look at the face of any family, nor do we need to be a lackey of any family. We can continue to survive and continue to raise the banner of the Jin Yang gang. However, although Brother Hai has the title of a guest of the Jin Yang gang, it is still not a legitimate title. Therefore, I have decided to give up my position to Brother Hai. Now, do you understand? The burly man's lips squirmed, but he remained silent for a long time, and then finally retreated. I have an opinion. A thin man squeezed in. Leader, how many of the current gangs in the capital don't attach themselves to the nobles? Leader also said that if we don't attach ourselves to the nobles, then even a gang as strong as the Jinyang gang will only be able to survive in the cracks, and may even be in danger. Since that's the case, why don't we simply choose a family? As long as we make an agreement and divide the benefits as reasonably as possible, then we may not necessarily become dependent on a certain family. This way, we will have a strong backer behind us, and our brothers will also have someone to talk to, whether it be in the court or in the wilderness. Isn't that better? Why do we insist on stubbornly guarding our foundation and provoking attacks in vain? In your opinion, which noble family is the most suitable? Hai Chen Feng clasped his hands behind his back and didn't turn around, but his voice floated over in a low tone. In this subordinate's humble opinion, the Mu Rong family and the Li family are both very suitable. The only thing that isn't suitable is that struggling to survive on your own is a very unwise move. The thin man said in a loud voice. The azure figure suddenly turned around, and it seemed as if the waves of the sea had suddenly surged up violently. Bang! The thin man was hit in the chest by Hai Chen Feng's palm, and his internal organs immediately ruptured. His body was sent flying far away, and his whole body was still in the air when it suddenly split into pieces and died without a complete corpse. A real man is born in this world, and yet he has to rely on others to drag out an ignoble existence. Living like this is worse than death. Hai Chen Feng suddenly turned around and looked at the crowd with a heavy expression. If you want to live, then live to the fullest. Cowardly people don't deserve to be brothers of the Jin Yang gang. People who have secretly accepted benefits from others don't deserve to stand here. Now, tell me, who else has any objections? Brothers who are willing to share life and death with me and create a better future for the Jin Yang gang can take a step forward. Hai Chen Feng ordered Ling Ling, and his hawk-like eyes swept over the faces of the crowd. From now on, I, Hai Chen Feng, am the new leader of the Jin Yang gang. I will give you tomorrow to consider, and if you want to leave, then leave. If you want to stay, then wait here. After tomorrow, the Jin Yang gang will have a new beginning. When the time comes, no one will be able to violate the rules of the gang. Those who violate the rules will die. Hai Chen Feng had finally shown his aggressiveness and his ruthlessness. Even if the thin man hadn't accepted any benefits from others, but if he were to raise any objections, Hai Chen Feng would still use him to establish his prestige. Bloody means were indispensable for the transfer of power. He could only blame his bad luck. The curtain of night had fallen, and the crowd silently dispersed. Everyone couldn't help but shudder when they saw the corpse of the thin man, and hastened their footsteps as they left. Hai Chen Feng had finally taken over the Jin Yang gang. The next step would be to expand to the periphery. Hai Chen Feng had finally taken his first step. This was also the first step that Jun Moxie had requested, to unify the capital's gangs. And this was only the first step. By the time Jun Moxie returned to the Jun family's residence, the lanterns had already been lit. The young Master Jun was in a very good mood on the way back, because he had not only retaliated against the sixth elder, but had also obtained a mysterious jade pendant. However, the ability of this jade pendant had yet to be explored by Jun Moxie. However, the Hongjun Pagoda had been very active ever since the appearance of this jade pendant, and this had convinced Jun Moxie that this was by no means an ordinary jade pendant. He faintly felt that this jade pendant wasn't a jade pendant, but rather an unknown substance. Jun Moxie tossed it into the Hongjun Pagoda after he had obtained it. Upon returning home, Jun Daxiao was surprised to find that the solitary eagle, was waiting for him in Jun Wui's study. Why did this old man come back? Moreover, he had a very unhappy look on his face. No one in the Jun family had dared to provoke this old man. So who could have caused him to behave like this? Chapter 230. Today's breaking news. Emergency. Requesting assistance. All for the glory of the brothers and sisters who support the evil monarch. Brothers and sisters, please support us. The evil monarch's position requires us to work together. Begging for monthly votes, the solitary falcon's spittle almost sprayed onto Jun Mosie's face. Damn it. You deceived this old man into staying at the Jun residence with your flowery words. And it turned out that there was such a big trap hidden inside. First there was the Silver Blizzard City, and then there was the Shui Hun Manor. You bastard. Do you think my old bones can handle such a big thing? Why didn't you tell me earlier? Tell you earlier? Jun Daxiao blinked his eyes as the corners of his mouth twitched. If I had told you earlier, then you would have been in the prairie by now. Would you have stayed here to help me? Do you really think that I'm stupid? You. The solitary falcon was extremely depressed. Yes, you're not stupid. Not only that, but you're extremely shrewd. I'm stupid. The great Master Falcon wouldn't have needed to weigh the pros and cons of this trap if he hadn't seen the young Master Jun's eagle formula that day. Perhaps he would have left without any hesitation. However, he had seen the young Master Jun's unrivaled technique. So, the great Master Falcon wasn't willing to retreat, even if he knew that he would have to face the other two great masters. What a joke. How could such an opportunity be obtained so easily? Not to mention the fact that this kid has a matchless expert behind him. Although he knew that the opposite party was telling the truth, he still felt uncomfortable in his heart. Being used by a junior to this extent, who would feel comfortable in their hearts? That would be like seeing a ghost. Although the harvest was indeed great, but besides, this kid's words are too direct. It really makes this old man angry. Hey kid, when will your master get here? The solitary falcon asked. This old man wants to discuss the Silver Blizzard City and the Shui Hun Manor with him. The solitary falcon might even throw the Silver Blizzard City and the Shui Hun Manor to the back of his mind if that expert really appears. My master, Jun Moxie blinked his eyes. He travels the world freely, and his whereabouts are uncertain. How would I know when he'll come? He's always been the one looking for me. I don't have the time to touch him. Don't tell me I have to shoulder this alone. Solitary Eagle's eyes widened as he felt a chill run down his spine. Why are you alone? Jun Moxie's eyes widened in bewilderment. Solitary Eagle was delighted. Who else? Are you talking about your third uncle and your grandpa? Although they are not weak, they can't get involved in the fight for Shenxian. Are they friends of your master? How powerful are they? What are you thinking about? I mean, don't you still have me? Jun Moxie pointed at his chest and said with an unyielding expression, I will fight alongside you. You brat, you're nothing. Solitary Eagle was enraged. Even a fart can make a sound. You're not even as good as a fart. They can kill you with a single breath. The Silver Blizzard City and the Shuehun Manor have more than 10 supreme, divine Xian experts on their side. This old man's 2 fists can't deal with 4 or 5 of them at the same time. So what about the others? How can you protect the Jun family? Just do your best. Jun Moxie rested his chin on his hand and said in a deep voice, I'll K your grandmother. Solitary Eagle was so angry that he blurted out vulgarities. Just do your best? Where do you have a strength? You're really shameless. Solitary Eagle had the urge to turn around. Don't worry, we'll cross the bridge when we come to it. Jun Moxie tried to comfort him. What's the rush? What if I can't cross the bridge? What if there's no way out? Solitary Eagle glared at him, as if he wanted to swallow him whole. I've never seen such a heartless and useless person. Then just hit him. Jun Dashao's words made Solitary Eagle so angry that he almost fainted. You bastard, can you even hit him? Solitary Eagle blew his beard and glared at Jun Moxie angrily. Facing such a mischievous guy was like a dog trying to bite a hedgehog. There was no place to bite, and he was only making his liver hurt. I definitely can't hit him, but don't I still have you? Jun Mo Xie rolled his eyelids. You are one of the 8 great masters. So, even if the sky were to collapse, you would still be taller. So, you would be able to hold it up with a gentle lift of your hand. I believe that you would be able to turn it upside down as long as you hit it with all your strength. Even if you can't kill them, you'll still be able to injure them. You hit him first, and then I'll fill in the gaps. Wouldn't that be an advantage for me? Solitary Eagle was exasperated. He suddenly realized something. Coming here and waiting for this kid was a huge mistake. This guy actually had this kind of idea. He planned to let him be the cannon fodder first, and then he would fish in troubled waters. How can there be such a despicable and shameless person in this world? He has really reached a certain level. This old man has really opened his eyes today. You brat, do you know anything about the Silver Blizzard City? Solitary Eagle angrily stood up and wanted to leave. Staying with this brat is making things difficult for me. However, he still wanted to warn him before leaving. Do you know anything about the Shuehun Manor? Even if you do, how much do you know? You don't know the immensity of heaven and earth, and you're talking nonsense. You brat, you'll die sooner or later, and you won't even know how you died. Solitary Eagle wanted to leave after he finished speaking. Of course, he only wanted to go to the third Master Jun's courtyard to rest. After all, the young Master Jun hadn't finished learning all of his skills. So, he wouldn't leave even if someone tried to drive him away. However, this time, it was Jun Dashao's turn to be unhappy. Jun Dashao had seen Solitary Eagle's aggressive appearance before. Therefore, he hadn't given him a good look. However, Solitary Eagle's tone indicated that this great master should know a lot of inside information. This would be very useful to him. Therefore, Jun Dashao couldn't help but feel excited and wanted to extract more information from him. How could I not know? However, the Silver Blizzard City and the Shuehun Manor may be arrogant, but how could they be compared to the genuine 8 great masters? What a joke. Jun Dashao's flattery was seamless. His face was full of sincerity and honesty. So, don't look at me as if I don't care about it. In fact, anyone would be the same. Think about it. The Solitary Eagle is one of the 8 great masters. So, what do I need to be afraid of in this world? Haha, I'm full of confidence. Solitary Eagle was just about to take a step forward when he suddenly realized something. I was wondering why this kid was so confident. It turns out that this old man has given him this illusion. But what he said seems to be reasonable. There's really nothing to be afraid of in the presence of one of the 8 great masters. No wonder. The burden of fame. Solitary Eagle sighed in his heart. My unrivaled fame has given this kid such confidence. No wonder he's jumping up and down without a care in the world. He even dares to talk back to the Silver Blizzard City's great masters. However, it's not good to maintain this kind of mentality for a long time. Solitary Eagle pondered for a moment. Then, he suddenly realized that the June family would relax their guard because of his presence. In case the Silver Blizzard City or the Shui Hun Manor were to attack, then wouldn't I be harming the June family instead? I can't do anything about it. My reputation is too resounding. Young June, this old man, is one of the 8 great masters. But this old man only has the strength of one person. There's a limit to a person's strength. Solitary Eagle's tone had softened a lot. He was ready to enlighten this confused and lost sheep. His voice was sighing, but his tone of arrogance was undisguised. It was evident that June Dashao's flattery had a considerable effect. I've also thought about this. June Moxie spoke in an honest and sincere manner. You see, the Silver Blizzard City and the Shui Hun Manor both have a great master. But I don't think that those 2 great masters would lower their statuses to deal with our June family, right? As long as the great masters Feng Shui and Zhu Tian don't get involved, then do you think that there's anyone else in these 2 places that you can't deal with? I don't think so. The Solitary Eagle nodded and smiled. You're right. Apart from Han Feng Shui and Li Zhu Tian, everyone else from the Silver Blizzard City and the Shui Hun Manor are nothing in my eyes. Even Shun Xian's men are no exception. They can't even withstand a single blow. The corners of June Moxie's mouth twitched. This old man, I gave him a bamboo pole, and he actually went along with it. He's intoxicated. But is this the time for you to be intoxicated? Don't let your guard down. This is a matter of life and death. So quickly wake up. Yes, what else do we need to be afraid of? Even if they gather together and attack us at once, we'll still be able to suppress them as long as you're here. You're our June family's stabilizing force, an unbreakable pillar. Perhaps we can even defeat them in one fell swoop. It'll be like a stone striking an egg if you make a move. It'll be as easy as blowing off dust. No, I can't do that. The Solitary Eagle was arrogant and unruly, but he wasn't arrogant enough to think that he could single-handedly fight against the Silver Blizzard City and the Shui Hun Manor, with the exception of the 2 great masters. The remaining forces can't be underestimated. It'll be difficult for me to deal with them alone. I'm afraid it won't be difficult, right? It'll be impossible to match them. Jun Dashao almost vomited, but he forced himself to hold back and revealed an innocent smile. I think you can do it, just like today. Didn't everything calm down the moment you made your move? You only needed 1.5 moves to take care of a master like Shun Xian. Wouldn't everything be settled if you made another 3 or 5 moves? The Solitary Eagle's heroic spirit soared. He stood up, clasped his hands behind his back, and slowly paced back and forth. His eyes were full of excitement, and his face was solemn as he calmly said, Don't talk nonsense. Don't underestimate the enemy. It's over. This old man doesn't want to come down. Jun Dashao was somewhat flabbergasted. I've already said so much. Why don't you come down from the stairs? Why don't you tell me about the specific situation of the 2 big forces? You're still immersed in intoxication. Sir Great Master, you're indeed a great master, but you're a man, shouldn't you have some face? Chapter 231. Seeing that the Solitary Eagle was still immersed in it, Jun Dashao lost his patience, picked up a question that he wanted to know the most, and asked it bluntly. It seemed that this guy in front of him was not a person who knew what was called a roundabout way. Beating around the bush with him was tantamount to showing his charming eyes to a blind man, and it would be a waste of effort. It was better to go straight to the point and meet him with bare blades. Who told you that Shun Xian is the supreme martial artist? The highest cultivation? The Solitary Eagle rolled his eyes, looked at Jun Moxie, and was a little unhappy. He was in the midst of showing off his valiant and heroic bearing as he single-handedly traversed between the experts of the two great forces, but was suddenly interrupted by June and Mosia. It was as if he was about to climax, but had to stop the battle. Instantly, he felt somewhat dispirited. This is simply misleading the students. How could a mere Shun Xian be the highest realm? What a big joke. Oh, then, is there a higher realm above Shun Xian? You tell me. Let me broaden my horizons. Jun Moxie pretended to be stupid, but in fact, he really did not know. Is Shun Xian not the supreme martial artist? Then what does the supreme martial artist Shun Xian mean? Idiot! The solitary eagle was angry, and with a strong sense of impatience. Shun Xian is Shun Xian. The supreme martial artist is the supreme martial artist. Understand? The so-called supreme divine Xian is nothing but a false rumor spread by mediocre people. It's a complete mess, a complete mess. Oh, Jun Moxie opened his eyes wide. Mysterious Qi is the most magical martial art in the world. The solitary eagle's expression became serious, as if he was on a pilgrimage. Jun Moxie laughed contemptuously in his heart. Mysterious Qi is the most magical martial art? So what if my art of unlocking heaven's fortune is 1,000,000 times stronger than Xian Qi? Mystical Qi can slow down aging, increase one's physical strength, and extend one's lifespan. When cultivated to a high level, it can even move mountains and seas and summon wind and rain. The solitary eagle's eyes were filled with fanaticism. How can it only be used to kill people? Move mountains and drain seas? Call the wind and summon the rain? Jun Moxie jumped to his feet. This time, he was really surprised. Jun Daxiao's eyes almost popped out, and his jaw almost dropped to the ground. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little, the solitary eagle said proudly, but there's an obvious example right in front of us. That mysterious master of yours burned down 60 acres of maple forest with just a wave of his hand. TSK, yes, K. I believe he's already seen the door of this kind of godly skill. Oh. Jun Moxie sat down like a deflated ball. F***CK. He actually deduced it from this. Xian Qi, those below the 9th level are ants. This saying is both right and wrong. The solitary eagle said, those below the 9th level are completely useless. They're not even qualified to be compared to ants. The correct way to put it is, those below the Shun Xian are ants. There aren't many people in the world who could be called human. Jun Moxie said gloomily. They're all ants. Above the Shun Xian, there are the 12 levels of Shun Xian. The people of the secular world only call them beginner, intermediate, and advanced levels. This is a big fallacy. The solitary eagle smiled proudly, as if he was looking down on the world. Shun Xian is the 12th level, one step at a time. Shun Xian is the 12th level, one step at a time. Jun Moxie repeated in silence. He asked, what does that mean? From Tian Xian onwards, there are 12 levels above the Shun Xian. From the 1st level to the 12th level, the advancement of each level is as difficult as ascending to heaven. The difference between each level is like heaven and earth. That's why I said that Shun Xian is the 12th level, one step at a time. The solitary eagle snorted and said, the 12th level is the level above the Shun Xian. In my eyes, only those who enter the 12th level of Shun Xian can be considered as real people. And the 12th level of Shun Xian is the division of levels among the strong in the Shun Xian. Those below the Shun Xian are not qualified to know. They're not qualified to know. Then what level are you at now? Jun Moxie asked curiously. My old rival, Feng Wanyun, and I are both in the 5th level. Among the 8 supreme martial artists, our levels are the lowest. The solitary eagle was a little dispirited when he said this. 5th level. I don't know if I can break through to the 6th level in my lifetime. Below the 5th level is the Shun Xian level. Above the 5th level is the supreme martial artist. The so-called supreme Shun Xian means, to be called a supreme martial artist, one must first reach Shun Xian. Shun Xian might not be a supreme martial artist, but the supreme martial artist is definitely Shun Xian. The 5th level of Shun Xian is the first step to ascending to heaven. After a huge breakthrough at the 4th level, one can ascend to the level of Shunxian. At the 5th level, one has the heaven's perception, and one has the ability to establish his own sect. With a new understanding, one can vaguely borrow the power of heaven and earth for one's own use. This is the realm of the supreme martial artist. Those below the 5th level have yet to understand the ability to borrow the power of heaven and earth. Therefore, even if one is at the peak of the 4th level, it is only Shun Xian, not a supreme martial artist. Then, Yinbi Chun and Li Ju Tian must be the 12th level of Shun Xian. Jun Moxie felt as if a whole new world had appeared in front of him, and he couldn't help but feel as if his horizons had been broadened. Definitely not. The solitary eagle shook his head, but he didn't give a reason. Jun Moxie asked again, but the solitary eagle didn't say anything. After a long time, he said, Yinbi Chun is at the 8th level of Shun Xian. Any higher is impossible. The 12th level of Shun Xian comes from an ancient legend. According to Shun Xian's realm, there are 12 levels. Every 4 levels is a big stage, and the bottleneck between the 4th level and the 5th level is the 5th level, and the 8th level is the 9th level. Take the 4th level and the 5th level as an example. Although there is only a difference of 1 level, the difference in strength is like heaven and earth. This is the so-called difference between Shun Xian and a great master. Since he had already decided to tell the young Master Jun about the mysteries of the spirit Xian, the solitary falcon decided to explain everything in detail to him. So that's how it is. Then, was the realm above the 8th level of Shun Xian? Since Yinbi Chun is only at the 8th level, does it mean that if someone reaches the 9th level of the 8th level, that person would be the best in the world? Jun Daxiao was very concerned about this matter. He believed that the young master could reach the Shun Xian's realm in 3 to 5 years' time with his rapid progress. Therefore, he was very interested in the realm that the 8 great masters hadn't reached. The realm above the 8th level of Shun Xian is a whole new world. Even I don't have the qualifications to know about it. In this world, only Yinbi Chun, Li Ju Tian, and that person from Tian Fa have the qualifications. Of course, your master isn't limited by this limit. In my opinion, your master's level is definitely higher than mine. This old man rarely admires anyone in his life. Even if it was Yinbi Chun, this old man has the confidence to chase after him. But this old man can't help but admire your master's realm. The solitary eagle sighed and stood up. He then pulled out a jar of wine from under Jun Moxie's bed, opened the seal, and gulped it down. It seemed as if he was drowning his sorrows in wine. So, there's such a strange division of strength. Jun Moxie let out a sigh of relief. It turned out that the division of strength in this world was so strange and cruel. One didn't have the qualifications to know about such things until they reached that realm. There was no need to explain the reasoning behind it. Even though the 12 grades of Immortal Xian were closely divided, there were actually veins that could be followed. It was just like the Earth before he had transmigrated. Even though everyone was equal on the surface, the internal hierarchy was extremely strict. Ordinary people at the bottom would never understand the matters of the upper echelons. Although the foundation was different, the principles behind it were the same. What he had heard from his grandfather or his third uncle were only ordinary rumors. Perhaps he knew a little more than the others, but his knowledge would never exceed the level of a Sky Xian expert's knowledge. But what he had heard from the mouth of the solitary eagle was a whole new world. So, would he be able to reach a higher realm in the future after coming into contact with Yinbi Chun or other people? They were at the same level as the solitary eagle, but they were a few steps ahead of the solitary eagle. So, it wouldn't be surprising if they had new understandings. So, where's the peak of this world? Jun Moxie was lost in thought. He had forgotten to feel sorry for the 10,000 silvers he had spent on that jar of wine. So, do you know anything special about the Silver Blizzard City and the Shuehun Manor? Jun Moxie raised his head. His eyes were shining brightly. This old man can only say that your Jun family is very bold, and your luck is also very good. The solitary eagle sighed. He felt a little depressed as he mentioned this matter. So, he couldn't help but glare at Jun Moxie. It's very strange. Your June family is a worldly family, but you've managed to survive in the face of an existence like the Silver Blizzard City. This is no small miracle. The solitary eagle shook his head. Let's not talk about the Shui Manor. But the Silver Blizzard City isn't something you can afford to provoke. This old man would have walked away if I didn't know that your master was behind the June family. I wouldn't have accompanied you in this crazy business. That would have been akin to courting death, No matter how attractive you are, it's only meaningful if you're alive. The solitary eagle sighed with emotion. He didn't know anything, and he had been led into a hornet's nest. This was truly depressing. Is the Silver Blizzard City really that powerful? Do we really not have the slightest chance of winning? June Mo Xie frowned. He was somewhat puzzled. The strength of the three elders from the Silver Blizzard City was similar to that of Shun Xian, but they weren't that strong. So, he believed that the solitary eagle would be able to deal with them by himself. So, why is he taking this matter so seriously? Is he trying to raise his own status? Jun Daxiao had a malicious thought in his mind. The third, sixth, and ninth elders aren't worth mentioning. But the problem is that you've provoked the Silver Blizzard City's Xiao family. This is tantamount to a direct confrontation with the Silver Blizzard City. Do you understand the difference? The solitary falcon looked at Jun Mo Xie with pity in his eyes. He sighed and thought that the ignorant were indeed fearless. Chapter 232. This is related to a secret. It is said that 300 years ago, there was a large faction in the world called the Supreme Alliance that ruled over half of the world's underworld factions. Their prestige and strength were unparalleled and could be said to be unparalleled under the heavens. Whether it was a peerless expert or a Shan Xian expert, upon seeing the symbol of the Supreme Alliance, they would have to take a detour. Otherwise, they would be in trouble. The solitary eagle continued slowly. The young master of the Supreme Alliance, Yulin Feng, met a woman by chance. That woman was as beautiful as a painting, and she was called the Nine Heavens Jade Phoenix, Kong Yinluo. At that time, she was publicly recognized as the #1 beauty under the heavens. Yulin Feng was excited to see his prey. He used all kinds of methods and countless experts to get his hands on Kong Yinluo, but to no avail. When Yulin Feng saw that he couldn't win the heart of the beauty, he finally decided to kill her. He exterminated the Kong clan to get his hands on the beauty. But the last moment of Kong Yinluo's life, 3 people suddenly appeared and rescued her. She fell in love with the eldest of the 3, and they became husband and wife. On that night, Yulin Feng was besieged by the 3 of them, and his head was separated from his body, and he died a violent death. Jun Moxie's heart stirred. Why was the story of the solitary eagle so similar to the matter of the Shui Manor and Guanqing Han? The eldest of the 3 was called Han Xiao Yao, the second was called Xiao Xing Chun, and the third was called Chu Duan Xiang. They were all top heroes of the world at that time, peerless martial arts geniuses. From the moment Han Xiao Yao rescued Kong Yinluo and killed Yulin Feng, the 3 brothers became irreconcilable enemies with the Supreme Alliance. The Supreme Alliance's leader, Yu Zhanyun, issued a strict order. The 4 of them must be killed at all costs. Thus, a calamity began to unfold. The 3 of them knew that it was impossible for them to fight against the Supreme Alliance with their strength alone. In a battle, the 4 of them were no match for the Supreme Alliance and fled far away, their whereabouts unknown. But what no one knew was that the 4 of them went to an extremely cold place and concealed their identities, plotting a future plan. These 4 people established their own forces at the peak of a snowy mountain in the land of extreme cold. They're the 3 founding ancestors of the Silver Blizzard City. They're also the founding ancestors of the Han family, the Xiao family, and the Chu family. 20 years later, the 4 of them had achieved great success in their cultivation and gathered a considerable force. They decided to find trouble with the Supreme Alliance. It just so happened that the Supreme Alliance was stirring up the world and had reached the point where the heavens were angry and the people were resentful. When the 4 of them took the lead, everyone responded. The heroes of the world gathered together to fight against them. In just 3 years, the Supreme Alliance, which was once the strongest force in the world, collapsed and was completely erased from the world. But in the final battle, Han Xiaoyao and Yu Zhanyun were both like arrows at the end of their flight. When they unleashed their last move, they were already powerless to resist. But at this moment, the second city lord of Blizzard's Silver City, Xiao Xingchun, used his heavily injured body to block Yu Zhanyun's sure-kill attack on Han Xiaoyao and perish together with Yu Zhanyun. At that time, Xiao Xingchun's cultivation was already above Han Xiaoyao's. His Xin cultivation had advanced by leaps and bounds, and he only needed one more step before he could ascend to the top of the world. He had a beautiful wife and a young son at home. It could be said that he was in the best years of his life. But for the sake of his sworn brother, he resolutely died. His face was still calm even at the moment of his death. It was clear that he was a heroic hero. Han Xiaoyao grieved over the death of his sworn brother and let out a long howl that shook the heavens. In a short period of time, his hair and beard turned white, and he brandished his sword in front of everyone. He cut off 2 of his fingers, and blood flowed out. In front of the heroes of the world, he made a blood oath. As long as the Silver Blizzard City exists, the descendants of the Xiao family will never die. The teachings of our ancestors have been passed down from generation to generation, and we will never break this promise. The solitary eagle seemed to be a little emotional. As he spoke of this brotherly love, his voice became a little fierce. Jun Moxie let out a heavy sigh. He finally understood what the solitary eagle meant. The Jun family being able to survive until now was truly a stroke of luck. The Xiao family may not be the family of the Lord of the Silver Blizzard City, but the Xiao family's words are extremely important in the Silver Blizzard City. This is something that no one can change. Moreover, the lords of the Silver Blizzard City had always treated the descendants of the Xiao family with a doting attitude. Do you understand now? As long as the Jun family faces the Xiao family, it's the same as facing the entire Silver Blizzard City. This fact will not change. The solitary eagle let out a long sigh and gulped down a few mouthfuls of wine. Then he sighed and said, "Forget about Han Xiaoyao. Even I would be happy to have such a brother in my life. I, the solitary eagle, would also disregard life and death for the sake of such a brotherly love." But it's precisely because of this that saving the Jun family from the hands of the Xiao family is truly difficult. Even I am helpless in this matter. I really don't know how your third uncle's woman managed to do it. The solitary eagle sighed. Then he said in a lonely tone, "But I'm sure that no matter how that girl did it, the process must have been extraordinarily difficult. That girl is very bitter, ah." The solitary eagle turned his head to look at the dark night sky after he finished speaking. Then he looked up at the sky, and his eyes revealed an indescribable and complicated expression. It was very distant and very painful. It seemed as if he was thinking of something from the past. So that's how it was. Jun Daxiao let out a long sigh. His heart felt heavy for a moment. This was the first time that the hitman Jun, who had lived 2 lives, felt that this matter was very thorny. The Jun family had suffered a series of major changes. Several of the Jun family's mainstays had lost their lives and had almost been unable to recover from this setback. The only survivor, Jun Wui, had been crippled in both his legs and had felt that there was no hope of ever being cured. Although the Jun family's father and son were filled with resentment, but they were helpless to do anything. After all, the arm couldn't twist the thigh. However, the Silver Blizzard City Xiao family had already made a move against the Jun family in the past. So, how could they have stopped halfway? Why didn't they cut the weeds and eliminate the roots? The Xiao family had given up on that day, so there must have been a reason behind this. And this reason was 100% tied to that pitiful woman, Han Yinyao. Who knew what Han Yinyao had sacrificed in order to save the Jun family? How much effort had she put in? Who knew what kind of miserable life that pitiful woman had been living alone in the snowstorm city all these years? It was true that the Jun family was suffering, and it was certainly miserable. But how easy could that woman be? Although the Jun family and the Silver Blizzard City's Xiao family had an irreconcilable enmity, But Han Yin Yao, that respectable woman, had also saved the Jun family's life. I must get Han Yin Yao out as soon as possible and reunite with my third uncle so that the lovers can finally be together. The hitman, Jun, suddenly felt a sense of impatience. He had come to understand how Jun Woo Yi had gone through these past 10 years. Jun Woo Yi's face had always been calm and tranquil, but he had hidden so much pain and helplessness. Jun Daxiao could imagine Han Yin Yao's efforts. So, how could Jun Woo Yi, the third Master Jun, not think of it? He would only think deeper, further, and worse. He had implicated his entire family in a moment of passion. If it weren't for the fact that his two brothers had passed away, and if it weren't for his father, Jun Woo Yi would have cut his own throat a long time ago. Forcing himself to live under these circumstances was definitely 10,000 times more difficult than dying, and 10,000 times more painful. Moreover, he had a woman who had sacrificed herself for him. His beloved had been waiting for him in a distant place and had been silently sacrificing herself for a little bit of hope. How could this be endured? Jun Woo Yi's shoulders were shouldering a pain that even the hitman Jun couldn't understand. This was a burden that no one could share. Under such circumstances, he had to drag his crippled body to live for the sake of his father, for the sake of his family, and for the sake of his descendants. This in itself was a heroic act. Death was actually very easy. A single stab would suffice. But forcing himself to live on meant that he would have to suffer 1,000 stabs in his heart every day and night. Staying alive wasn't easy. Old Eagle, you just said that you're at the 5th level of the Spirit Xian realm, and that you're at the beginning of the Great Master realm. It seems that advancing to the 6th level of the Spirit Xian realm isn't as difficult as advancing from the 4th level to the 5th level. However, advancing to the 6th level isn't going to be an easy task. In fact, it might even be an extremely difficult obstacle for you to overcome. Is that right? Jun Mo Xie clenched his teeth, and his gaze deepened. The solitary falcon had never heard Jun Mo Xie speak in such a heavy tone that he had never used before. Solitary Eagle instinctively felt that these words of Jun Moxie seemed to contain some kind of absolute power and unquestionable determination. He couldn't help but be startled in his heart. He slightly raised his head, and his pair of eyes suddenly became as sharp as a sword. The reason is like this. What do you mean by this? You brat. What do you want to say? Just say it. When they were joking a moment ago, both of them were laughing and scolding each other. But now, both of them knew that the other party wasn't joking at all. Instead, they were speaking in an unusually serious manner. Even the surrounding atmosphere suddenly became tense. It was as if an earth-shattering bow had been pulled open in the middle of the dark night. The arrow was already on the bowstring. My master is obsessed with refining elixirs. A few years ago, he had a chance to research a very special elixir. Jun Moxie's eyes were fixated on Solitary Eagle's eyes, and he didn't even blink. This elixir requires countless elixirs and heavenly treasures, and the refining process is even more difficult. But once it is successfully refined, it has the ability to upgrade a person's rank. It ignores the promotion of one's rank, and there are no side effects. Do you understand what this means? Solitary Eagle looked at him with eagle-like eyes and didn't move for a long time. Jun Moxie didn't continue speaking until here, and just calmly looked at Solitary Eagle. Solitary Eagle undoubtedly needed this elixir. Moreover, it was an urgent need. When a person reaches his own limit, and there are still many people in front of him, and he may not be able to catch up to them, it will give birth to unwillingness in his heart. Otherwise, Solitary Eagle, a dignified great master, would condescend to ask a little kid for advice on martial arts. This is irrefutable evidence that Solitary Eagle has been stuck at his limit for a long time, and is eager to break through. If this world really has this kind of elixir, then Solitary Eagle, or not only Solitary Eagle, but any strong person in the world would spare no effort to obtain it. The next thing to discuss was undoubtedly the conditions. Both of them understood. Even if this elixir really exists, Jun Moxie would never give it to Solitary Eagle for no reason and no price. Chapter 233. Solitary Eagle would have to pay a huge price if he wanted to obtain this elixir, and Solitary Eagle was well aware of the price he would have to pay. Therefore, the rest of June Moc's words did not need to be said. Both of them were well aware of it. For pairs of eyes looked at each other. Both of them had a calm smile on their faces, but they were secretly competing against each other. They were competing to see who would be the first to open their mouths. A long time passed. The solitary falcon suddenly shook his head and laughed, and then sighed. I can only say that each of the conditions you proposed is too tempting for me to refuse. Not only do I not want to, but I also can't. And you really know when to advance and when to retreat. At such a young age, your willpower has already reached such a high level. It's really amazing. I, Solitary Eagle, have traveled all over the world and have seen countless people, but I've never seen a little monster like you. But there's always a chance, and you've met one today, because this time you've miscalculated. Oh, Hitman June's expression didn't change in the slightest, but he slightly raised his eyes. The elixir you're talking about is a great temptation, and I believe that no one in the world can resist it. If I can advance from the 5th level of the Shun Xian to the 6th level of the Shun Xian, then I, Solitary Eagle, will be reborn and my strength will multiply. I can't deny that this is indeed an irresistible temptation. Solitary Eagle smiled proudly. But even if it's an irresistible temptation, it's impossible for me, Solitary Eagle, to bow down to anyone. Even if your master were to propose this condition to me, it would still be impossible. Because I'm Solitary Eagle, the god of the prairie. Solitary Eagle's eyes flashed with an unruly flame, and he sneered, I will only be the overlord of the sky, and will never be anyone's slave. No one is an exception. Such boldness. June Moxie applauded lightly and smiled. Perhaps Eagle Deity has misunderstood something. What did I say that I wanted Supreme Eagle to be someone's slave? I don't think I've ever asked you to agree to any conditions of mine. Am I right? June Brat, I've underestimated you. However, when you said those words, although your expression, voice, and even the look in your eyes did not change, do you dare to say to your own conscience that you did not have such a thought just now? The Solitary Falcon said in a somewhat sarcastic tone, You're the kind of person who will do anything to achieve your goals. Once there are benefits, the first thing you pursue is to maximize the benefits. I'm confident that I'm not wrong about this. June Moxie was silent for a long time. Had he really underestimated the masters of this world? He had lived 2 lives, and ever since he reincarnated, everything had gone according to his wishes. Today was the first time he had been rebutted by someone whom he was confident he could control. June Dashao finally smiled bitterly and said, Eagle Deity is right. I've always been this kind of person. You're not wrong at all, but that was then, and this is now. Since you don't agree, I'll keep it to myself. But I can still help you increase your cultivation, but I need you to do something for me. If you agree, I'll immediately inform my master and ask him to gather the ingredients and start refining the medicine. What is it? Why don't you tell me about it? The Solitary Falcon didn't show the slightest bit of excitement. Instead, he seemed somewhat vigilant. After spending time together, Solitary Eagle already knew that it was harder to get any benefits from this little fox than to reach the heavens, even though the benefits he could give were absolutely genuine. But if he didn't ask for enough, he would definitely not release the eagle until he saw the rabbit. Therefore, Solitary Eagle had no choice but to be cautious. If he wasn't careful, he would be in trouble. I only request that you lend me a helping hand if the June family decides to attack the Silver Blizzard City one day and seek revenge on the Shao family. Then we'll settle our grudges, and we'll find a way to rescue my 3rd aunt. June Moc's eyes shone brightly. I'm only going to rescue her. Solitary Eagle pondered for a long time and paced back and forth in the room a few times. Finally, he gritted his teeth and made up his mind. Fine. Just this one thing. It's a deal. June Moxie smiled. But that's at least a year from now. The 1-year agreement is still valid. The solitary falcon smiled proudly. If this had happened within a year, then I wouldn't have needed that pill. Because if it's within a year, I'll feel ashamed. But if it's after a year, I must have it. June Moxie's lips curled into a genuine smile for the first time. That's right. Solitary Eagle's temper was exactly what June Moxie had been insisting on for a long time. He would never take advantage of anyone. But, no matter what, he would never be at a disadvantage. Solitary Eagle carried the 2 jars of wine and left. June Moxie took out the strange jade from the Hongjun Pagoda and looked at it for a while. But he couldn't figure out what it was, so he put it back in. However, Junimo Xie could clearly feel that the Hongjun Pagoda's aura had suddenly gained a refreshing vitality after this piece of jade had been placed inside. Moreover, the spiritual qi had also become much denser than before. Moreover, the strands of spiritual qi had wrapped around this strange piece of jade and hadn't dissipated for a long time. June Moxie hugged his knees as he looked at the moon outside the window. I must find a way to get those 3 kinds of spirit herbs as soon as possible so that I can upgrade my grandfather's rank as soon as possible. If things go wrong, I will have a better chance of escaping alive. This is the first thing I must do. Secondly, the matter of alchemy was also imminent. Be it Solitary Eagle or Jun Wui, both of them needed to increase their strength as soon as possible. It was the same for him. Also, he couldn't neglect the Tian Fa forest. Thirdly, Hai Chen Feng must be urged to carry out the unification of Tian Xiang's underworld forces as soon as possible. Therefore, he had to grasp all the developments in the Tian Xiang city in the shortest possible time. Things came one after the other, and none of them were easy to deal with. Hitman June frowned in contemplation and was at a loss as the moon gradually sank to the west, under the light of the oil lamp. June Dashao's figure looked exceptionally lonely on top of the wall of the small courtyard. A faint white shadow suddenly appeared and looked at June Moxie, who was deep in thought in front of the window. Under the flickering light, June Moxie's tightly furrowed eyebrows were particularly clear. It was obvious that this delicate and pretty boy was racking his brains for the future of his family, and was racking his brains day and night. After a long time, this beautiful figure faintly sighed in pity and disappeared in a flash. Only a wisp of a faint fragrance was left behind. Junwoo Yi, who was separated by a courtyard, was leaning against a chair in front of the window with his eyes slightly closed. His rigid face was bulging slightly, and his mouth was unconsciously clenching his teeth. His sword-like eyebrows were slightly wrinkled, and every fine line of his muscles was showing a deep desolation. In the dead of night, Hai Chun Feng's entire body was covered in a blue light that rippled like the sea. He floated out of the courtyard and shouted towards the dozens of experts of the Jin Yang gang. Ling Ling, begin the operation. I want to see the results before the sun rises tomorrow. Everyone didn't make the slightest sound in response, but they raised their weapons in unison and raised them towards the sky. The soft moonlight reflected off the cold blades and imperceptibly dyed them with a layer of gloomy luster, just like congealed blood. Inside the Li family's mansion, a few silhouettes lightly leaped over the wall in groups of 2 and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Tonight was going to be a bloody night in the Tian Xiang city. The Spirit Dragon Gang, one of the 6 big underground gangs of the capital, could be considered to have ushered in a disaster today. Although the 6 big underground gangs of the capital were ranked higher and lower, there wasn't much of a disparity between the specific forces of each gang. Even if the Jinyang Gang was ranked first and the Northern City Gang was ranked last, the Jinyang Gang was stronger, but not by much. At the very least, the Northern City Gang didn't have the overwhelming strength to completely subdue the Jinyang Gang. Therefore, there was an unwritten tacit understanding between the 6 big gangs. Even if there were conflicts between the 6 gangs, they couldn't involve annexation. Otherwise, the other gangs would band together and attack them. Therefore, the 6 gangs were able to coexist in a relatively peaceful manner. However, this afternoon, the Spirit Dragon Gang received a reply from the Jinyang Gang. During this period of time, the situation of the 6 big gangs was getting more and more difficult. Countless forces of the imperial court and aristocratic families were constantly nibbling away at the original sphere of influence of the underground gangs. In fact, the Northern City Gang, which was ranked last among the 6 big gangs, had been annihilated by the imperial court's leader, Old Master Tang, in one fell swoop. The underground gangs couldn't find a single clue as to what was going on. They couldn't help but feel anxious and couldn't think of a solution. Therefore, the Spirit Dragon Gang took the lead and proposed an alliance, hoping that they could help each other in the same boat. The main target of this alliance was naturally the Jin Yang Gang, which was the strongest of the 6 big gangs. Unfortunately, the alliance was proposed at the same time that Solitary Eagle was wreaking havoc in the Jin Yang Gang. At that time, Jin Feng Lai was under pressure, so how could he have the time to deal with such a matter? Therefore, the matter was temporarily suppressed. Today, the Spirit Dragon Gang suddenly received a reply from the Jin Yang Gang and was overjoyed. However, after reading it, the gang leader Long Dahai tore the letter into pieces. This was a letter asking the Spirit Dragon Gang to surrender. This was too arrogant. The 6 big gangs had existed in the Tianxiang city for more than 10 years and had never heard of a gang surrendering to another gang. The 6 big gangs had always been on equal footing. So what kind of thing was Jin Feng Lai? Why did he dare to ask us to surrender? Long Dahai was seething with anger and immediately gathered the leaders of the gang to discuss countermeasures. Everyone was so excited that they wanted to fight to the death with the Jin Yang Gang. Some people even clamored that they should take this opportunity to annex the Jin Yang Gang and make the Spirit Dragon Gang their own boss. However, some people were calm and suggested that they should take their time to think about it. Just as they were quarreling fiercely, suddenly, the door of the hall exploded into pieces of wood. The wood shavings flew in all directions, causing everyone's faces to burn with pain. Several people's faces were cut open, and they were dripping with blood. Everyone was furious and looked toward the door. A burst of blue light flashed in the dark of the night. The sawdust fell, and a man stood outside the door. He was dressed in blue, and his body was glowing with blue light. Chapter 234. Hai Chun Feng and Tian Xin's murderous aura made everyone from the Spirit Dragon Gang feel a chill run down their spine. They felt as if they were standing naked on a snowy peak in the middle of winter. The cold wind was like a knife, cutting their skin inch by inch. The chill penetrated deep into their souls. This murderous aura was enough to freeze everyone's fighting spirit, will, and even soul. It was an irresistible and terrifying strength. Long Dahai's face turned extremely pale as he faced Hai Chun Feng's imposing manner. He felt as if the man before him was a magnificent mountain, while he himself was just a rock at the foot of the mountain. He didn't even have the qualifications to look up to him. He didn't know why, but he inexplicably retreated 5 or 6 steps. He felt his breathing become a little smoother, and then he felt his back hit something. He then realized that he had been standing in the middle of the hall, but now he was leaning against the innermost wall. What kind of pressure is this? Who are you, Your Excellency? This is a matter between the Spirit Dragon Gang and the Jin Yang Gang. Why do you want to interfere with our affairs? Long Dahai gathered his courage and asked in a stern voice, "Where is the leader of the Jin Yang Gang? Where is Jin Feng Lai? Since you have the intention to annex the Spirit Dragon, why hide your head and show your tail? Show yourself." His voice was loud, and it seemed somewhat dignified. However, there was a distinct tremor in his voice. This sentence, which was supposed to be a reprimand to raise his own aura, sounded more like a plea to others. "I am the current leader of the Jin Yang Gang. Would I ever hide my head and show my tail?" Hai Chun Feng raised his eyes and looked straight at Long Dahai's face. His murderous aura instantly shrouded Long Dahai's body. Long Dahai was shocked. His cultivation was at the early stage of the Earth Xian realm, and the two of them were separated by a dozen steps. But he felt as if he was facing Hai Chun Feng face to face. The opposite party's gaze was so intense that his eyes felt like they were burning and hurting. The feeling of impending death was so clear. Although the hall was densely packed with members of the Dragon Spirit Gang, Long Dahai felt that there was no one around him. None of them could bring him any sense of security. In such a huge space, it was as if he and the tyrannical black-clothed man were the only ones facing each other. An unrivaled and irresistible feeling of decadence rose from the bottom of Long Dahai's heart. Long Dahai only felt that his knees were sore and weak, and his whole body was drenched in sweat. He suddenly had an urge to kneel down and submit. Hai Chunfeng's eyes were as sharp as an eagle's. He suddenly waved his hand, and his blue cloak fluttered in the wind. Suddenly, the sound of a rising tide was heard. It sounded as if 10,000 horses were galloping. It seemed as if they were on the horizon a moment ago, but in the next moment, they were right in front of their eyes. From a horizon, he arrived in front of them in an instant. Kill! Suddenly, a loud roar erupted from outside. Hundreds of people roared in unison, and the sound of disorderly footsteps could be heard. The stream of people rushed in like a tide. Everyone had a sword in their hands. The shadows of the people on the walls flickered. Archers stood on all four sides of the walls and aimed their bows at the members of the Dragon Spirit Gang. The dark arrowheads glittered with a cold light under the illumination of the bright lights. It seemed as if the god of death was grinning fiercely and revealing his sharp teeth. The Dragon Spirit Gang spies, guards, and spies have been wiped out by Hai Chunfeng. Those who submit will live, and those who resist will die. I'll count to 3. If Long Dahai and his subordinates don't respond by then kill them all. Hai Chunfeng's eyes were cold and emotionless. He slowly stretched out his right hand, and a blue light shone as he bent his first finger. 1. The members of the Dragon Spirit Gang panicked and looked towards Long Dahai for help. Gang leader. Everyone's voice seemed to be pleading. 2. Hai Chunfeng didn't show the slightest bit of hesitation. His complexion was cold as he bent his second finger. Long Dahai's face was deathly pale. His lips opened and closed, and his eyes were filled with despair and helplessness. Archers, get ready. Hai Chunfeng raised his arm, and the sound of tsunami was heard. It seemed that he was furious. Roar! The surrounding archers responded in unison and pulled their bows into the shape of a full moon. As soon as Hai Chunfeng said, 3, 10,000 arrows will be fired. Death was imminent. Resisting would only lead to death. So, the only option left for them to survive was, wait. Long Dahai roared, but his voice sounded as if he was crying, I am willing to submit. As he spoke, Long Dahai's entire body was like a deflated balloon. He instantly became soft. Following this order, everyone in the hall threw down their weapons. Their faces were covered in cold sweat. It was as if a heavy burden had been lifted off their shoulders, as if they had been granted amnesty. Good. Hai Chunfeng praised. Since you've surrendered, we'll be a family from now on. Great protector. You'll be responsible for settling the Dragon Spirit Gang. Yes, I'll obey the gang leader's orders. A tall and sturdy figure stepped out from the shadows. He had thick eyebrows, curly beard, a lion's nose, and a wide mouth. It was Jin Fenglai. Jin Fenglai, you... Long Dahai pointed at him in disbelief and was at a loss for words. Haha, it's me. Is it surprising that I'm abdicating my position? Jin Fenglai laughed heartily and seemed very carefree. To be honest, Jin Fenglai really didn't mind Hai Chunfeng usurping his position as the gang's leader. Not to mention the friendship between him and Hai Chunfeng. It didn't matter who became the gang's leader. Besides, Hai Chunfeng becoming the gang's leader would only benefit him and the Jinyang gang, and wouldn't cause any harm to them. How awe-inspiring. How baleful. You've subdued an entire gang with just a few words. You've left me in awe. A Sky Xian expert is truly extraordinary. A voice drifted in from time to time. It was enigmatic and carried a strong, sour taste. Who's there? Hai Chunfeng looked around, and suddenly his figure flashed and a blue light rippled. His body flew high into the air and went straight to the roof, where he stood proudly. It's me. A strange laughter resounded. Several archers on the southern wall suddenly cried out in alarm as they fell to the ground. Two black-clothed men appeared on the wall together. They had a fierce look in their eyes as they looked at Hai Chin Feng. However, you can't be the only one to enjoy the big pie that is the capital's underworld. You'll have to spit it out, even if you swallow it. Hai Chin Feng roared, and the aura around his body rose sharply. A bright blue light emerged from his body. Well, since you've spoken, then come and snatch it. Eliminate the weak and leave the strong. This is the rule of the game between the strong. Suddenly, his figure flew high into the air, and the blue light flashed. In a split second, he crossed the distance between the roof and the courtyard wall and flew above the two men and struck down with a loud bang. The two black-clothed men sneered and said, "Master Tian Xian, is it very rare?" Suddenly, he rose up and rotated his body at a high speed. Then, he moved in a very strange spiral to meet Hai Chin Feng's falling body head-on. The two men shouted in unison, and a dreamy blue radiance shot out from their bodies. The three collided with each other with a loud bang. Then, the three men exploded like fireworks. The three men floated back at the same time, but then stopped in the air at the same time. Then, they turned around and flew back. Hai Chin Feng's expression was calm, and the corners of his mouth were curled into a confident smile. His palms were like giant axes that could split mountains and were chopping down again and again. The sky-blue energy took the shape of a crescent moon and was unceasingly attacking the two men. The two men whistled loudly and attacked with their hands and feet. They didn't retreat even half a step. Suddenly, one of the black-clothed men let out a shrill cry and retreated. The other man frantically rushed forward and started a tangled battle with Hai Chin Feng. The black-clothed man who had retreated previously stood on the wall, and the blue radiance on his body retracted for a moment. Then, it flourished again and seemed to be far stronger than before. His body emitted a cold chi, and his palms turned jet black in the blink of an eye. Then, he leapt up again and ferociously jabbed at Hai Chin Feng. With Hai Chin Feng's strength, he was confident that he would be able to win even if he had to face two men at the same time. Now, he was only left with one man to tangle with, so it would be even easier for him to do so. But this was a battle between two strong men like Tian Xian, so it would take a lot of effort to get rid of one's opponent without getting injured. Hai Chin Feng had the upper hand in this fight and was about to take down his opponent. Suddenly, he felt a cold wind blowing in his face. It was accompanied by a pungent, fishy smell. He couldn't help but shiver in his heart. He crisscrossed his palms, and four crescent moon-shaped xianqi flew out. Then his body flew back, and he shouted in a stern voice, "This is the ruthless, cold-blooded finger. Is your excellency the cold-blooded master, Lei Wu Bei's disciple?" You're quite knowledgeable. You actually recognize my ruthless, cold-blooded finger." The black-clothed man laughed in a strange manner. "Since you recognize it, why don't you quickly kneel down and beg for mercy?" The black-clothed man thought that he was the direct descendant of one of the 8 great masters. So, the Sky Xian expert in front of him wouldn't have the guts to offend the black-clothed man, even if he wasn't able to subdue the black-clothed man. So, he could force the black-clothed man to retreat. Then, the Spirit Dragon Gang and the Jinyang Gang would be at his fingertips. This black-clothed man's wishful thinking was undoubtedly very good. But how could everything go according to one's wishes? Shut your mother's fart. Hai Chin Feng didn't pay attention to the man's arrogant theory. He cursed in anger. He flipped his palm, and a long sword appeared in his hand with a clang sound. Then, he rushed forward once again. It was as if the waves of the sea were rolling up and down. The sky-blue waves were mixed with the snow-white spray of the sea. Jade blue, snow-white sword. "So, you're a disciple of the Blue Master." The black-clothed man laughed heartily. "That's good. We're both disciples of the 8 great masters. Let's see who's better and who's better." Hai Chin Feng became even angrier in his heart. Hai Chin Feng was confident that he could defeat these 2 men. So, he had already planned to keep them here. However, the other side had used the unique martial art of another great master. Hai Chin Feng didn't want to rashly create an irreconcilable enmity with the other side. Therefore, He had used the unique sword art of the Jade Wave White Snow Sword. Since they were both disciples of the two great master-level masters, Hai Feng thought that this matter would be over as long as these two men stopped fighting. But he hadn't expected that these two men would continue to pester him. They didn't seem to care about him in the slightest. In fact, there was a hint of contempt in their tone. Hai Feng didn't know that these two men were Li Yuran's two senior brothers. Lei Jianhong had promised Li Yuran that he would help him unify the capital's underworld. Tonight was the first night, but he hadn't expected that he would be a step too late. Hai Feng had taken the lead. So, how could these two men give up? They wouldn't know how to explain it to their junior brother if they didn't take it back. Besides, this was also related to the eldest brother's reputation. Therefore, these two men weren't willing to give up even though they knew that the two sides had some sort of relationship. Chapter 235. Today's second update has arrived. I'm a little late, sorry. Although they had judged that Hai Feng's strength was greater than theirs, they had also guessed Hai Feng's intentions. They were certain that Hai Feng wouldn't dare to rashly injure them, so they were blindly fighting for a fluke. Hai Feng was aware that he had been merciful, but the other side didn't seem to appreciate it. He couldn't help but become angrier and angrier. Suddenly, he retracted his sword and flew out like a meteor. He shouted, "It's inconvenient to fight here. Do the cold-blooded master's disciples have the guts to follow me and decide who's the winner?" The two men laughed. "Good. Whoever loses will withdraw from the fight for hegemony of the capital's underworld." Blue lights flashed as the three men disappeared in the blink of an eye. Long Dahai and Jin Feng Lai were both Earth Xian level cultivators. Their cultivations weren't weak, but they were still dazzled and unable to control themselves as they watched the three men fight. Jin Feng Lai patted Long Dahai's shoulder after the three men had gone far away. "Let's go. Let's discuss how we should arrange this." Jin Feng Lai was a veteran of the martial world. Although he couldn't rely on his own strength to determine who was stronger and who was weaker, but based on his understanding of Hai Feng and the conversation between the two sides, it wasn't difficult for him to conclude that Hai Feng had the upper hand. So naturally, he wasn't worried. Only then did Long Dahai retract his gaze. Closing his mouth that was wide open in shock, he snorted and followed Jin Feng Lai inside. Far north, Silver Blizzard City. Everywhere one looked, one could only see a boundless expanse of white snow and glaciers. In this uninhabited place, on the top of the snow-capped peak, there was a majestic city that seemed to be made of pure ice and snow. It was magnificent, but also mysterious and unpredictable. Hidden in the wind and snow, hidden in the clouds, it overlooked the world. At dawn, before the sun had even risen, the bell rang to summon everyone. The melodious sound of the bell rang out slowly, breaking the seemingly eternal silence. A few pure white birds were frightened by the sudden sound of the drum and flew up in fright. Their clear cries filled the sky as they circled and danced in the air, not falling down for a long time. In a spacious hall that was made purely from 10,000 years old mysterious ice, there were many portraits on the snow-white hard stone wall. The portraits were of people dressed in white with different postures, but their different faces revealed the same expression: arrogant, cold, and domineering. Each pair of eyes was filled with the same murderous aura. Only those who controlled life and death would have such eyes. Just by looking at these eyes, one could imagine that in the eyes of this man, all living beings were like ants, and that he was a proud person who stood above the clouds. These people were the ancestors of the Silver Blizzard City. This hall occupied a very large area. Even if it could accommodate hundreds of people eating at the same time, it wouldn't feel the least bit crowded. An old man in white robes, white hair, white beard, and white eyebrows stood in front of the incense burner table with his hands clasped behind his back. He silently looked at the portraits on the wall in front of him. His eyes had a profound look in them, and his face was as calm as water and as cold as ice. He didn't say a word. His hair was as white as snow, but his back was ramrod straight, and his chest was straight. His entire person was like a peerless sword that was constantly emitting an awe-inspiring aura. No one could doubt the immense power contained within this old man's frail body. It was enough to shock the world, and shock the world with its astonishing strength. Whooshing sounds could be heard continuously. Many people in white came from all directions and quickly flashed into the hall. It seemed that everyone had their own position. Although there were many people entering the hall, there was no conflict and no one said a word. In just a moment, everyone stood in their fixed position and looked at the old man in the middle. Although there was a look of surprise in their eyes, they didn't say a word. These people's bodies were all shining with blue light. These people were all Tianxian experts. The sound of footsteps could be heard as the 7 old men slowly walked over in a line. Every step of each of them was abnormally steady, and they were unhurried. It was as if they wanted to leave footprints on the 10,000-year-old mysterious ice floor. These 7 people slowly walked behind the old man in white in the middle and stood quietly. At the entrance of the hall, there was already a graceful man in white. His eyes flashed, and his power radiated in all directions. He only appeared at the entrance and stood proudly, but made people feel that the whole world was in the hands of this man. Beside him was a beautiful middle-aged woman that lightly leaned against him like a weak willow in the wind. Both of them possessed peerless appearances. The man was handsome, elegant, and outstanding, whereas the woman was an outstanding beauty with peerless talent. They were truly a match made in heaven and earth, and they were truly a match made in heaven and earth that made others admire them. As soon as the man and woman appeared, nearly 100 people gathered in the hall turned around, bowed, and said in unison, "Welcome, mistress. No need to be so polite." The 2 smiled and slowly walked in and sat down on the only 2 chairs in the middle. The entire hall could accommodate hundreds of people, but there were only 2 chairs. Only these 2 people had the qualifications to sit in this hall. And these 2 people were the current lord of Blizzard Silver City, the heavenly sword god, Han Zhanming, together with his wife, Han Zhanqing. The old man in the middle waved his hand and said in a clear voice, "Today, I have invited everyone here to discuss an important matter. Because this matter concerns the future of Blizzard Silver City, everyone under Xinxian is to immediately go out and guard the hall. Do not allow anyone to come within 500 feet of the hall. Anyone who dares to come near will be killed without mercy. Yes, we obey the great elder's command." Everyone cupped their hands and slowly left the hall. There were less than 10 people left in the hall, and it suddenly seemed a lot more spacious. There were less than 20 people left in the hall. "Is there news from Tianxiang?" Han Zhanming smiled and looked at the great elder, Xiao Xingyun. If it was any other news, the great elder might not be so cautious. Just as the lord of the city said, "It is news from Tianxiang City. Please take a look. Third brother has sent this news from Tianxiang City. Even with our snow eagle, it took almost an entire night to deliver it. The news is quite shocking." The great elder replied and unfolded a piece of paper and handed it over. Han Zhanming shook his head with a smile and took it. Shui Shuangqing, who was beside him, also came over to read it. The 2 of them were a little interested. The great elder, who was usually calm and collected, said that the news was shocking. How shocking could it be? The calm expressions on the 2's faces became more and more serious as they read the paper, and the calm smile on their faces had long disappeared. The beautiful woman's beautiful face turned pale, and an inexplicable look of worry appeared on her face. There was also a faint trace of happiness, and she could not help but grab her husband's hands tightly, as if to remind him of something. "Is there such a thing? Everyone, take a look. Tell us what you think." Han Zhanming finally finished reading, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. Feeling his wife's movement, he sighed again and waved his hand, and the paper was passed around for everyone to see. Solitary Eagle was in the June family, and he injured 6th brother. This, Feng Wu was injured by a mysterious person, and then the mysterious person suddenly appeared and snatched the soul-replenishing jade. 3rd brother said that he had no way to resist. How is this possible?" Everyone cried out in surprise. They looked at each other, and their expressions were filled with bewilderment and uncertainty. It's only been a few days, and so many things have happened. The great elder, Shaoxing Yun Lenglang, smiled. And that arrogant kid from a Jun family has actually been cured of his injuries. So many rare things have happened. Han Zhanming was silent for a moment, and then looked up at the great elder. "Great elder, you have summoned everyone here, so you must have a plan? What plan can I have?" "The Silver Blizzard City's affairs are decided by the master of the city." The great elder bowed slightly, and took half a step back. "Great elder, you are an important member of the city. What do you suggest?" Han Zhanming was obviously not one to beat around the bush, and asked directly. That solitary eagle, relying on his status as a great master, humiliated sixth brother for no reason, and greatly damaged our prestige. He must be severely punished. If we let this matter go, where will the prestige of the Silver Blizzard City go? This is one of the reasons. The great elder said slowly. To think that he would severely punish one of the 8 great masters. This great elder was too bold. But when they heard this suggestion, no one in the meeting showed any change in expression, and they all nodded. Obviously, in the eyes of the leaders of the Silver Blizzard City, one of the 8 great masters, the eagle deity of the prairie, was not a threat at all. This showed that the Silver Blizzard City's strength had reached a shocking level. If there is one, then there must be another? Han Zhanming nodded lightly, and his expression did not change. "Yes, that soul-replenishing jade is our Shao family's heirloom, and its effects are extraordinary. It can be said to be a celestial object, and it cannot fall into the hands of an outsider. This piece of jade had to be retrieved. There was no room for discussion about this either. No matter who took the jade, we can't deal with them expeditiously. This is the second reason." The great elder's eyes flashed with anger, and it was obvious that he was very angry about the matter of the soul-replenishing jade being stolen. As for this point, perhaps we need to think about it carefully. If what third elder said in the letter is true, then with just the strength of the people here, even if we gather everyone's strength, we may not be able to take back the soul-replenishing jade. Moreover, we can't dispatch so many people, so the chances of success are naturally even slimmer. If we are not careful, I am afraid that we will be in danger of losing our men at any time. Han Zhanming lightly tapped on the armrest of his chair and said quietly with his eyes half closed, "The master of the city's concerns are correct. This time, we need to think carefully before dispatching people, and try to avoid conflict with that mysterious person as much as possible. However, the third elder is only a first-grade martial artist like Shen Xian, and his knowledge may not necessarily be correct. Even if there is someone like the solitary eagle, in the eyes of a first-grade martial artist, he is still a celestial being. Therefore, the mysterious person mentioned in the letter may be far more powerful than the old master of the city's conjecture, but I do not believe it. I believe that even the strongest of the 8 great masters, Yin Bi Chun, does not have such strength. In the secular world, is there someone who can surpass Yin Bi Chun? From this, it can be seen that this information may not be true. The great elder's white brows furrowed. He spoke very slowly. Finally, he added, "Therefore, no matter what, we need to send people first. If that person is really unfathomable, then we can treat it as an inquiry. If that person is just a name, then we can immediately take it back. Yes, the great elder is experienced and prudent, and this can be regarded as the best plan." Han Zhanming looked at the great elder with approval and said, "But for what the great elder said, I think there are 3. Yes." The great elder raised his white eyebrows. Lengling said, "The third is the Jun family. This small secular family has repeatedly challenged the authority of the Silver Blizzard City, and this is intolerable. This old man suggests that we exterminate their entire family to warn the world not to lightly challenge the authority of the Silver Blizzard City." Chapter 236. When the Jun family was mentioned, Xue Shuangqing's expression suddenly tightened, and she couldn't help but tighten her grip on her husband's hand. This can't be done. Han Zhongming's eyebrows slanted, like two sharp swords suddenly being unsheathed. I can agree to the first 2 points and act according to the Great Elder's suggestion, but don't mention the extermination of the Jun family. Do we have to go through what happened 10 years ago again? Han Zhongming looked at the elders in front of him and said solemnly, 10 years ago, many of your Shao family's Shunxian attacked the Jun family without my knowledge, and even intervened in the war between two countries, causing the Jun family's talents to wither and the family to be destroyed. Although I finally stopped them, the Jun family suffered 3 blows in succession. The second generation only has 1 cripple, and the third generation only has 1 debauchee. No matter how you look at it, the Jun family has gone too far. No matter what, the Jun family is a loyal family, and the grievances between your two families are only personal. I still don't understand what the Great Elder just said. Since when has the Jun family repeatedly challenged the authority of the Silver Blizzard City? Wasn't it only the Shao family that they offended? This matter is not to be mentioned again. If anyone acts without permission again, I will punish them according to the laws of the city, and there will be no mercy. But the Jun family now has the support of 2 strong people, and sooner or later, they will become a big problem for the Silver Blizzard City. Even if we don't take the initiative to deal with the Jun family, they will definitely attack the Silver Blizzard City once they are strong enough to take revenge. City Lord, it doesn't matter who was right or wrong in the past. The fact remains that we killed 4 important members of the Jun family and crippled Junwoo Yi. This fact hasn't changed. I believe that this hatred will be difficult to resolve in this lifetime. Do you want the Shao family to be slaughtered to vent the anger of the Jun family? The Great Elder looked very indignant. The root cause of this matter is the Shao clan's fault. Could it be that First Elder wishes to make mistakes again and again, making mistakes on top of mistakes? Just because of the love affair of a pair of children, blood will flow for hundreds of miles, and corpses will be laid 5 steps away. Killing good people because of this matter is a taboo in the Silver Blizzard City. We have been arguing about this for 10 years. They were also deadlocked for 10 years. I really have no interest in arguing any further. Han Zhongming's eyes turned cold. Great Elder, if the Jun family really wants to take revenge on the Silver Blizzard City, then you can do whatever you want, and I won't interfere. But don't mention this matter again until the Jun family attacks the Silver Blizzard City. Wait for the Jun family to attack the Silver Blizzard City? What huge joke. With just the meager strength of a secular family. Wasn't that purely courting death? The Jun family won't have such strength even after a few hundred years. Another elder snorted and said. This man was tall and thin. He was the second elder, Shao Buyu. Since the Jun family is so weak, why are the Shao family in such a hurry? Han Zhongming glared at them. The most important thing is that First Miss is not young anymore, and Hunter is still unmarried. If this drags on, the Great Elder saw that Han Zhongming was against it, so he didn't insist and changed the topic. This matter needs to be considered at length. Han Zhongming looked like he had a headache. Great Elder, have you forgotten what happened 10 years ago? Do you really want to drive Yao crazy and force her to death? Yao has always been your most beloved granddaughter. Do you really have the heart to do that? The Great Elder was silent for a long time. Then, he sighed sadly and didn't speak anymore. 10 years ago, when Han Yinyao returned to the Silver Blizzard City and heard the news that the Shao family was dealing with the Jun family, she went crazy. She threatened to kill herself and severed her meridians in front of Han Zhongming and the Great Elder. She swore to live and die with the Jun family. The scene of blood on the ground was still vivid in her mind. And this was the main reason why Han Zhongming didn't allow the Shao family to deal with the Jun family. He didn't forget that after the old master of the city rescued Han Yinyao, the Shao family thought that everything was over, so they attacked the Jun family again. At that time, Han Yinyao's body was weak and couldn't sever her meridians. But that stubborn woman stabbed 2 swords into her body and stood in front of the Great Elder with blood all over her body, asking him to rescind his order. The Great Elder had no choice but to cancel the secret plan against the Jun family. But it was also because of Han Yin Yao's fierce actions that the old master of the city flew into a rage, and Han Zhanming and his wife were furious with the Shao family. The Silver Blizzard City's divisions began to show at that time. Of course, these things were only known to a few people within the Silver Blizzard City. Outsiders didn't know about it. Let's take 10,000 steps back. As long as we teach the solitary falcon a lesson, wouldn't that be tantamount to giving the Jun family another heavy blow? Whether or not the Jun family can bear it is still uncertain. Let's not talk about exterminating the Shao family again. Han Zhanming sighed in his heart, and his eyes swept across the hall, looking at a lonely snow-capped peak not far away, thinking, Yao, this is all I can do for you. I only hope that you... In that case, I think there is no harm in making this arrangement. Although the Great Elder was somewhat unwilling, he had to give up and suggested, this time, second brother will lead the fifth and eighth brothers down the mountain. And to be on the safe side, will the old master of the city's 7 swords of ice and snow go with them? After all, if that mysterious person is really powerful, we will have a higher chance of success with the 7 swords of ice and snow. Good. That's the decision. The rest of the matters will be arranged by the Great Elder. Han Zhanming rubbed his forehead, stood up, and accompanied his wife out of the hall. Before they left the hall, he suddenly turned around and said firmly, in any case, no one is allowed to involve the Jun family. If anyone violates this, I will report this to my father and expel them from the Silver Blizzard City. There will be no mercy. After that, the two slowly walked away. The Great Elder's expression didn't change, but a trace of anger flashed in his eyes. He stood there calmly for a long time. Then, he suddenly turned around and looked at Xiao Buyu. Get ready. You'll leave the mountain this afternoon. Big brother, then what about the Jun family? Xiao Buyu frowned. There will be plenty of opportunities. Xiao Xingyan took a deep breath. After you go down the mountain, you must act appropriately. Yes. Outside the hall, Shuang Qing was relieved. She patted her chest and said with some lingering fear, Thank you for your help, husband. If not for your insistence, the Jun family would not have been able to escape this time. And if the Jun family had met with misfortune, I'm afraid Yao would have, although I stopped this matter in time. Yao Er's heart is still difficult to resolve. We can only take one step at a time. Han Zhanming sighed deeply, looked up at the snowflakes in the sky, and said softly, Yao has suffered too much for the past 10 years. As her father, how could I completely cut off her last glimmer of hope? No matter who it is, no one can hurt my daughter, my family. Han Zhanming Linglang said in a low voice. With a wave of his sleeves, a boulder that was covered by the wind and snow suddenly shattered into pieces, filling the sky with snowflakes. Shuang Qing snuggled up to her husband, suddenly feeling very peaceful and safe. She only felt that with her husband's broad shoulders, nothing in the world could hurt her and her 2 precious daughters. She could not help but smile contentedly. On a lonely snowy peak not far from the main hall, in a cave made of ice and snow, a graceful masked woman in white opened a letter in her jade-like hands. She only glanced at it, and her fingers suddenly trembled, and tears flowed out of her eyes. It's really him. His injury is really healed. God bless. The woman in white cried tears of joy, and her delicate body trembled like a leaf in the wind. For the past 10 years, she had been like an iceberg, but this letter had broken her frozen state of mind, revealing the weakness and helplessness buried deep in her heart. Tears flowed out of her eyes, and the woman in white sobbed in a low voice. Suddenly, she stood up, walked to the entrance of the cave, and knelt down devoutly. Looking at the dark sky, she put her palms together and prayed in a low voice. Thank God for his recovery. Thank God for his pain. Please give him happiness. I am willing to reduce my lifespan by 10 years, 20 years, in exchange for his safety and happiness. Even if we can't be together, I will still be your Yao, and always will be. Her soft prayer quietly melted into the wind and snow in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, a gale arose in the sky, and the snowflakes that hadn't stopped yet became bigger, denser, and fluttered down. The lonely and frail figure on the snowy peak was completely wrapped in the wind and snow. But the woman in white remained motionless on her knees and prayed devoutly. Her tears had frozen in ice. Not long after, 10 figures flew out of the silver city like shooting stars and hid in the wind and snow as they went down the mountain. Early in the morning, Fatty dragged Jundashao out of bed, wailing like a ghost. When he opened his eyes, he saw that Fatty was dressed in a navy blue robe and looked particularly spirited. His whole body seemed to have lost some weight, and at least he looked more like a human. His face was clean-shaven, and his hair exuded the fragrance of honey locust. His face was pale with powder. This Fatty had actually put on powder, and it was very thick. Moxie felt nauseous. Fatty, do you know that with your body size, you look very scary with makeup on? You actually put on such thick powder. Are you pretending to be a ghost? Why did you wake me up so early? He looked out of the window, and it was only dawn. Third young master. Boss, Fatty Tang was actually a little bashful. Didn't you say that you would accompany me to see Miss Sun today? Miss Sun? That Miss Sun? Oh, June Mo. Xie suddenly remembered. She's the fiancée that you lost to you once. F***CK. Fatty was a little angry. Can you not mention this? Didn't I do such a dirty thing? After saying that, he looked at himself with some self-satisfaction. I don't look bad now, right? Am I a little slimmer? And I have indeed become a lot slimmer. This is the truth, and I can indeed see a little human. The corner of June Moxie's mouth twitched. You are really too slim. You really fascinate me. Tang Yuan opened his mouth and laughed twice. He narcissistically spun in a circle, feeling very elegant. But this spin was not a big deal, and his originally tidied and soft belly was immediately spun up. It was like a big sandbag tied with a rubber belt, full of elasticity. With a whoosh, it also spun in a circle, and then slapped on his thigh and knee with a squeak. This is the first time we meet. I have to leave a good impression on Miss Sunday. Tang Yuan's small eyes were full of longing, and he looked very happy. Chapter 237. June Moxie couldn't bear to look at it, so he covered his eyes and groaned. He was very curious. What kind of woman would be able to bear the weight of nearly 250 kilograms? He couldn't help but be curious. After breakfast, the two of them stared at each other for a while. Then, they calculated that it was about time. So, they went out with a large group of bodyguards to meet the beautiful woman. Third young master, what do you think I'll do if Miss Sun dislikes me for being fat or heavy? Tang Yuan's mind was heavy along the way, and he was worried about personal gains and losses. The horse under his crotch was breathing heavily, snorting loudly, and frothing at the corners of its mouth. June Moxie grunted twice in response. His eyes were looking at both sides of the road, and he had an absent-minded look on his face. Fatty Tang didn't notice June Sun Xiao's absent-mindedness. He looked at his fat body in distress and sighed. Then he suddenly thought of something and slapped his thigh. Then he suddenly twisted his waist and excitedly asked, Third young master, do you think it will be effective if I lose weight, if you supervise me? The horse under his crotch let out a mournful whine, and its hooves trembled a few times. It panted heavily a few times, and turned its head to look at Tang Yuan with a sad expression. It then slowed down even more. It seemed that Fatty Tang's twisting of his waist had caused the horse to twist its waist. And, after I'm done with this and your injuries have mostly healed, I'll start to help you lose weight. June Mo. Xie smiled evilly as he rubbed his chin and said, I'll make you as thin as a bean sprout. Well, I'll leave it to you. You know, I'd be quite handsome if I wasn't so fat. Tang Yuan pinched his fingers together and gave June Moxie a coquettish wink. Go! June Mo. Xie fiercely whipped the horse's buttocks. It had just run out when it turned its head and spat out a mouthful of saliva. Fatty Tang's coquettish wink was too lethal. They actually arranged to meet here. June Moxie looked at the heavily guarded restaurant in front of him and couldn't help but widen his eyes. Your fiancé actually asked you to meet in a restaurant? This is too surprising. You really didn't propose the meeting place. It's really not me. Isn't it good to meet in a restaurant? I think it's pretty good. Tang Yuan looked at the young Master Jun in bewilderment and asked in bewilderment, "What's so strange about that? Isn't it strange? If it's a man and another man meeting in a restaurant, there's nothing wrong with that. However, it's a woman meeting her fiancé in a restaurant. That's a little out of the ordinary." Jun Moxie clicked his tongue and said, "Fatty, it seems that your future wife is no ordinary person. What's wrong with that? If not at a restaurant, then at a brothel?" Tang Yuan rolled his eyes. He didn't understand Jun Dashao's attitude. He snorted through his nostrils and said, "Don't be so surprised." Jun Mo Xie hadn't even had the time to speak when a white shadow suddenly flew out of the restaurant with a schwa sound. In fact, the white shadow had already landed on Jun Mo Xie's shoulder the moment he saw it. Its speed was in no way inferior to that of a first-class expert. Jun Dashao didn't react in the face of this sudden attack. He allowed the white shadow to stay on his shoulder. Instead, it whimpered twice and slid down to his chest. Then it drilled into his bosom. The clothes on his chest rose and fell, and a small head popped out of Jun Moxie's collar. It stretched its head and looked around. Then it snuggled up to him and didn't move. It was as if it was in the most intimate, reliable, and comfortable embrace. "Hey, little thing, how come you're here?" Hitman Jun had already figured out what that white shadow was. He pulled the ear of the little creature in his bosom and asked in a soft voice. The little thing that had suddenly fallen from the sky was naturally Dugu Xiaoyi's Iron Wing Panther. He could feel its weight in his bosom. He hadn't seen it for a few days, but it had grown a lot heavier. Furthermore, there was a pair of small protrusions on both of this little fellow's ribs sticking up obliquely. Normally, the Iron Wing Panther would only grow wings when it was nearing adulthood, when its strength had reached its peak. However, this little fellow that was at most a month old had already grown in embryonic form. This little fellow's future was absolutely limitless. The little thing's eyes were bright and watery as it listened to Jun Dashao's question. It whimpered twice, and its eyes were full of affection. It stuck out its pink tongue and gently licked Jun Dashao's collar. Then it happily turned over and stretched out its two small claws to grab Jun Dashao's collar. Its face was full of enjoyment, and it looked as if it wanted to hug him for another 500 years. The little thing was guarding against a good man who would throw it out. As for what he was asking, it didn't understand. The little girl regarded this little thing as the apple of her eye. Since it had appeared here, that meant Jun Moxie shook his head. There was no need to think about it any further. Since this little thing had appeared here, then the little girl Dugu Xiaoyi must also be here. Jun Dashao had a headache thinking about the little girl's unruly ways. Speaking of the entire Tianxiang city, including the emperor of the Tianxiang Empire whom Junimo Xie had yet to meet, young Master Jun might not be willing to put them in his eyes. But when it came to people he truly wanted to avoid, the little girl Dugu Xiaoyi was definitely one of them. But now that they were at the door, they couldn't retreat. Jun Dashao had no choice but to bite the bullet and beckon Fatty Tang to dismount from his horse. The two of them then walked inside. Could this be considered as knowing that there was a tiger on the mountain, but still walking toward the tiger's mountain? It seemed that Minister Sun had put in a lot of effort for today's meeting. He had gone through a lot of trouble to book the entire restaurant. The entire restaurant only had one table of guests in the central hall. Moreover, there were only two of them. One of them was wearing a light green robe and had an unusually petite figure. It was obviously that little girl Dugu Xiaoyi. Her braids would sway twice with every sentence she spoke. This was a habitual movement. But who was the person sitting with her? Beside Dugu Xiaoyi was a bold and forthright man. He had the back of a tiger and the waist of a bear. His shoulders were broad and his arms were thick. His hair was slightly yellow. One look and one could tell that this man was an extraordinary man. It seemed that the Dugu family was still worried. So, they had sent one of Dugu Xiaoyi's older brothers to be her bodyguard. I wonder which of the heroes and legends rush forward is it? However, Jun Daxiao could clearly feel that this man's temperament was above that of the heroes and legends rush forward, and the other heroes and legends rush forward. Could it be that the Dugu family is hiding the eighth brother? Jun Daxiao and Tang Yuan saw these two men as soon as they entered the restaurant. They were about to walk over when they suddenly felt that something was wrong. Jun Moxie patted his forehead. "Excuse me, Fatty Tang is here for a blind date." "I'm not here for a blind date. But where's that Miss Sun?" "It seems that there isn't a second woman here apart from Dugu Xiaoi. I don't know why, but an unprecedented sense of fear has inexplicably sprouted in my heart. In fact, I can't seem to get rid of it in any way I can." Jun Mo Xie's mind raced, and he faintly thought of an impossible possibility. He pulled Fatty's sleeve and asked in a low voice, "Fatty, have you seen your fiancée before? She's the young Miss Sun." Tang Yuan was so nervous that his palms were sweating. He felt that his whole body was out of sorts. His hands were pulling here and there, and his fat head was twisting around. He was sizing himself up in all directions. He had vowed to leave a perfect impression on his fiancée. So, when he heard Junimo Xie's words, he replied in a low voice, "No, but my fiancée is a genuine young lady from a noble family. How can an ordinary person see him if he doesn't step out of his house?" Then, Tang Yuan mysteriously moved closer to Junimo Xie's ear and said, "But I'm guessing that this person shouldn't be wrong because I've heard my grandfather say that he has a very good impression of Miss Sunday. So, my grandfather's eyesight is so good that he can't be wrong." "Then, what did your grandfather say?" Jun Moxie was very curious. "My grandfather said that girl from the Sun family has a big butt. She'll definitely give birth to a son. She'll be a perfect match for you." Tang Yuan smiled obscenely, his two short eyebrows jumping up and down in excitement. "Third young master, it's not like you don't know that this big brother likes women with big butts. My fiancée is this big brother's dream lover." He. Jun Moxie rolled his eyes and walked inside. He no longer paid attention to this obscene fatty. He even made up stories about his fiancée. It was really outrageous. But what kind of girl could make a perfect match for Fatty? Fatty's conduct and the fact that Minister Sun hadn't proposed to break off the engagement even though he had done such a dirty deed a while ago, it seemed very unusual. While Jun Daxiao was pondering over this strange matter, a voice shocked the hitman. "Jun, Brother Mo Xie, you've come." Dugu Xiaoi was the first to discover them. She excitedly welcomed them. "I guessed that you would accompany Fatty. So, I pestered Sister Sun to accompany her." I guess right. You've really come. Come quickly." Jun Moxie's whole body quivered. He felt a layer of goosebumps all over his body. Dugu Xiaoi's call of Brother Mo Xie made Jun Moxie's whole body turn cold. When did this girl become so polite to me? "Ah, it's you, Miss Dugu. We're really fated. We meet each other everywhere we go." Which sister son of yours is?" Jun Mo Xie quickly answered and tried to ask in case of what if. "You're still calling me Miss Dugu?" Dugu Xiaoi pouted in dissatisfaction. She looked at Jun Moxie with hatred. Then, she suddenly reached out and pulled little White out of Jun Moxie's arms. Ignoring the little guy's squeaking, she pursed her lips and said, "Isn't that right?" Tang Yuan had been drooling over his fiancée for a long time. So, he stretched out his neck to look. But he still couldn't find the beautiful figure of Miss Sunday. Because Dugu Xiaoi was pointing at the place where the tall and sturdy man was drinking by himself. Where was Miss Sun? Chapter 238. While Fatty was still in doubt, he saw the tall and sturdy man slowly stand up. When the man stood up, he couldn't be considered to be too tall, but his figure was abnormally plump and strong. The man slowly turned around, cupped his fists, and laughed heartily. "Is this the Jun family's Jun Sun Xiao and the Tang family's future husband, Tang Yuan? This little sister is Sun Xiao Mei." Tang Yuan, the eldest son of the Tang family, was dumbfounded. His eyes nearly popped out of their sockets, and his jaw nearly dropped to the ground. He looked at the woman in front of him, who was more forthright than a man. She had thick eyebrows and big eyes, and she wasn't ugly. Well, this was according to the standards of the Shandong burly men. This woman's hair was tied up in a hero bun, and she didn't have the slightest bit of makeup on her body. She didn't even have a single piece of jewelry on her head, and when she raised her hands and cupped her fists, she had a deep and lofty bearing, and as steady as Mount Tai. When she opened her mouth to speak, her voice was like a great bell, and it was deafening to the ears. She had the demeanor of a master, but is really not small fatty. She's exactly the type you like. Old Master was right. You really are a perfect match, a match made in heaven. Jun Daxiao didn't know what to say at this time and could only laugh a few times, awkwardly cupped his hands, and then congratulated Fatty in a low voice. Oh my! Tang Yuan's eyes were wide open, as if he had been struck by lightning. His normally small eyes had long turned into a bull's eyes, and his mouth was wide open from ear to ear, saliva dripping down. Suddenly, he let out a groan, and then his throat made the sound of a rooster being strangled. Hee. A few sounds were heard, and then his eyes rolled back as if he had been hanged. Suddenly, his huge body fell to the ground, and his head bounced twice before he fainted. Miss Sun Xiao Mei stood in front of Fatty Tang. Fatty Tang had been fantasizing about her for several years. She was the daughter of a noble family. She was the daughter of a high-ranking minister. She was the best candidate for a fiancé, and so on. The contrast was too great. The pitiful Tang Yuan Chu had suffered such a huge change. How could he withstand such a cruel blow? He eventually foamed at the mouth and fainted. It seems that this little girl has really frightened this fiancé of mine. Sun Xiaomei laughed at herself, and a trace of pain appeared in her eyes, but she immediately hid it. She looked at Tang Yuan for a while, and nodded, and said, "My future husband is really a little fat. He should lose some weight." After saying that, she cupped her hands and extended her hands, and said, "Jun Sun Xiao, please sit." Originally, Jun Daxiao had guessed the truth of the matter before Fatty Tang, and he didn't have a good first impression of this minister's daughter. It must be known that although Fatty was unbearable, he was still the heir of an important family in Tianxiang. No matter how one looked at it, his wife shouldn't be like Sun Xiaomei or Miss Sunday. It wasn't that he looked down on women, but in this world, women had always been the vassals of men. No matter how unbearable a man was, or how ugly he looked, it would still be a problem. But if a woman had a little flaw, it would be a huge problem. Not to mention the heroic Miss Sun. However, although Jun Daxiao had only known Miss Sun for a short time, he had a very good impression of this minister's daughter. His eyes revealed a sincere look of admiration, because this woman in front of him, other than her slightly inferior appearance and figure, was perfect in every aspect. This was in accordance with the saying, women are not inferior to men. Whether it was her temperament or her way of doing things, she was straightforward and efficient. Compared to most men, she was much better. If not for the fact that she was born a woman, this woman would certainly be a heroic figure. If one were to say that they weren't a match, then only Fatty couldn't match up to Miss Sunday. If Fatty let go, he would definitely be walking away with a treasure. However, this congenital defect had undoubtedly doomed her to a tragedy. After all, most men only looked at women based on their appearance. A woman's inner beauty, no matter how outstanding she was meaningless to most men. To put it bluntly, although Jun Daxiao admired her at this moment, it was only because he was an outsider. If Minister Sun had said to Jun Daxiao, since you think so highly of my daughter, then this old man will marry her to you, he would guarantee that Jun Daxiao would immediately flee and wouldn't dare to see Minister Sun's little daughter for the rest of his life. Such a treasure would be fine. Brother Mo Xie. Although Sister Sun's appearance isn't outstanding, she is kind, beautiful, intelligent, and extremely intelligent. She is one of our close friends, and Sister Sun is the most outstanding one. Sister Sun's personality is the most forthright and generous. She never takes trivial matters to heart. We all like her very much. Dugu Xiaoyi said with a smile as she stroked little White, who was in her arms. Very good. Jun Moxie praised sincerely. This wasn't just for show. Jun Daxiao understood the little lass's personality very well. She was naive and pure. If you treated her well from the bottom of your heart, she would definitely be able to tell. The evaluation from her mouth wouldn't contain any false or falsehood. It could be said that her evaluation was quite objective and true. With the background of this era, it could be said that there were very few women who could be so forthright and generous. They didn't care about trivial matters. Although Miss Sun's innate physique was somewhat flawed, it was already commendable. Sun Xiaomei smiled slightly and sat down. She picked up the teapot and poured a cup of tea for June Moxie. She raised her thick eyebrows and looked at June Moxie. She said, "June Sunshao, although today is the first time we meet, I feel that the third young master doesn't match up to the rumors." "Really?" June Moxie picked up the teacup and chuckled. He said, "What's wrong with it?" Sun Xiaomei didn't reply immediately. Instead, she smiled in a free and easy manner. It was a smile full of masculinity and heroism. It blossomed on her rough face. There was a kind of indescribable harmony in it. "To tell you the truth, I didn't come here today for Tang Yuan." Sun Xiaomei smiled. "This little girl and Tang Yuan's marriage was arranged by our parents. I'm a woman, and an extremely ugly woman at that. I've already accepted my fate, and I don't intend to resist. However, I've recorded everything that Tang Yuan has done for the past 5 years. I've recorded everything. I know everything about him, no matter how big or small, like the back of my hand." Jun Dashao suddenly felt a chill down his spine. "I mourn for Fatty. It seems that the hitman Jun can already foresee the miserable life of Fatty Tang. Tang Yuan isn't a good person. He's not a gentleman." Sun Xiaomei looked at Tang Yuan on the ground. She smiled and said, "To put it bluntly, he's an out-and-out scoundrel. He's a real villain." "Well said." Zhu Moxie laughed. He clapped his hands and said, "This evaluation can be said to have hit the nail on the head. But this villain has a true temperament." Sun Xiaomei smiled. "He doesn't hide what he likes or dislikes. He doesn't even dare to hide it. He doesn't even dare to say what he hates in front of his face. I like this kind of person with a true temperament. Therefore, even though his infamy is as bad as a pig, even though he is as stupid as a donkey, even though he is as fat as a pig, even though he is as stupid as a donkey, and has many other bad deeds, young master is his good friend. You should be more familiar with Tang Yuan than I am. I won't say anything more. I just want to emphasize one point. It's definitely not a beast. So, I have nothing to be dissatisfied with. Moreover, my condition isn't good. To be able to find such a partner, it can be said that I have someone to rely on in this life." Sun Xiaomei smiled lightly. "So, the two of us can be said to be a perfect match, a match made in heaven." Cough, cough, cough. Jun Moxie coughed a few times. He felt ashamed to face her. Ever since he came to this world, this was the first time he met a woman like this. Not only did she talk about her appearance, but she also didn't hide her marriage. If it was any other woman, she would have been ashamed. Even if she had 1,000 words in her heart, she would never dare to say it out loud. But Sun Xiaomei, the Sun family's lady Sun, talked and talked without stopping. Just this point alone was enough to be called a woman husband. "Jun Sunshao, you don't have to cough. You know yourself. Think about it. In this world, besides me, who else can stand Tang Yuan?" Sun Xiaomei smiled. "He's so heavy." This time, Jun Moxie was really shocked. His eyes widened and his mouth opened, but he couldn't say a word. This little girl was too bold. She really dared to say anything. Dugu Xiaoi covered her mouth and laughed. Her delicate shoulders trembled. She knew her close friend's character very well. She was not surprised at all. "I've long heard of Third Young Master's great name. Previously, I received Young Master's help to prevent the Tang family and the Han family from being humiliated. I thank you in advance. It's the fortune of 3 lifetimes to meet you today." Sun Xiaomei lowered her head and poured tea. She said unhurriedly, "With Young Master's wisdom, you should be able to understand the reason why this little girl met the two of you today. First, this little girl wants to see how fat this fiancé of mine is. Second, and also my main purpose today, is to see the rumored Jun Sun Shao. According to my understanding of Fatty Tang, he will definitely bring you here. Sure enough, it's as expected. Why do you want to see me?" Jun Moxie was somewhat puzzled. "What the hell are you doing? You two should go on a blind date." but in the end, it's still to see me. It's really strange. Jun Dashao wouldn't believe it, even if you beat him to death, if you said that it was only for the matter of the former's wife gambling. Apart from thanking you in person, it's also because I have two sisters. They're my best sisters. Sun Xiaomei looked meaningfully at Dugu Xiaoyi and said, one of them hates you to the core. The degree of her hatred for you has reached the point where it can't be increased. But the other one has deep feelings for you. It's not an exaggeration to say that she can't live without you. I'm very curious. How can this rumor number one debauchee in Tianxiang have such great charm? It can actually make my two best sisters show such completely different yet extreme thoughts. Dugu Xiaoyi's face turned red as she spoke. She twisted her waist and said, Sister Xiaomei, I have diarrhea today. It's been an endless day. I don't have the slightest bit of strength in my body. Even my circles have sunken in. It's very sad that I'm in this state at such a crucial time of the month. No matter what, this diarrhea has completely messed up my explosive plan. I want to cry, but have no tears now. I can only use my greatest willpower to ensure that I keep updating. If I fall down at such a time and stop updating, that would be my biggest failure. Chapter 239. Jun Mo. Xie laughed heartily and crossed his legs. Swinging them a couple of times, he said, I wonder who is that sister of yours who is so devoted to this young master? Ha ha. There are many people in Tianxiang City who hate me. Not to mention one. I'm afraid I can find 8 or 10 of them. But it's the first time I've heard of someone who is so devoted to me. This young master is quite interested to know who has such good eyesight. As soon as he said this, Dugu Xiaoyi immediately became nervous. She looked at Sun Xiaomei with a pleading look on her face and didn't want her to say anything. Why should I say anything? That person is far away. Sun Xiaomei smiled mysteriously. She ignored Dugu Xiaoyi's pleading look and continued to speak. He's right in front of you. Jun Sun Xiao, you've even accepted the token of love. Why are you still pretending to be confused? Token of love? Jun Moxie was shocked. He suddenly remembered the jade pendant that Dugu Xiaoyi had given to him that day. Could it be? Oh my God! Jun Dashao immediately turned his head to look at the shy Dugu Xiaoyi. The little girl had completely shrunk her head in her collar and wouldn't raise her head no matter what. Jun Moxie heaved a long sigh. How could he not understand the situation? He didn't expect that a silly little girl would set a lifelong relationship with him. Jun Dashao was a little depressed, but he didn't know why, but he also felt a faint sense of pride in his heart. Look, the original Jun Moxie was regarded as a gangster and a bully. How can anyone have a good impression of him? This young master has crossed over to this world. How long has it been? But there's already a beauty who has secretly fallen in love with me. The goddess has a heart, and she won't marry anyone else. A sense of accomplishment. Dugu Xiao, he was getting more and more embarrassed. Her own thoughts were hazy, but this elder sister's son had called out to her in a loud voice. This was so embarrassing that she was about to die. Sun Xiaomei had been paying attention to the subtle changes in Jun Dashao's expression. Finally, she said, I can finally confirm it now. It's very reasonable for the younger sister to hate you to the bone, and it can even be said that it's very reasonable. As for the other sister's love for you, it's not entirely without reason. Miss Sun, your words are very puzzling. At least, I am very puzzled. Jun Moxie waved his hand weakly. I still don't understand what you mean today. It's fine if you don't understand. If you really understood, then it would be a great misfortune for us girls. Sun Xiaomei smiled faintly. Then, she suddenly said thoughtfully, Jun Sun Xiao, you're not a good person. At least, you're not a so-called gentleman. Moreover, I'm very curious about one thing. How many people in this world are worthy of your attention? Hitman Jun was finally frightened. He suddenly raised his head and asked in a heavy tone, What did you say? Did I underestimate this woman? Arrogance. Arrogance that disdains the whole world. There's only one word in your eyes. Perhaps your eyes are usually very calm, and even very tranquil. But you're always revealing your arrogance. This is the pride in your bones. It's useless even if you try to cover it up. Sun Xiaomei chuckled and said, "But I must remind you of something. Consider it a gift for our first meeting. It doesn't matter how much capital you have or how arrogant you are, but it would be best for you to restrain your arrogance at the moment. After all, now is not the time for you to be arrogant." Then she smiled sweetly and stood up. She walked over to Duga Xiaoi and gently stroked her hair. Then she said in a gentle voice, "Little sister, you have good eyes." Unfortunately. Unfortunately what? Sister Sun? Duga Xiaoi didn't care about her shyness and asked nervously, "It's a pity that you're still too young." Sun Xiaomei smiled and said. However, she swallowed the words that were about to come out of her mouth. "It's a pity that no woman can control such a man. Little sister, you'll have to suffer in the future. This woman is very powerful." June Moxie's heart shivered. This woman is very observant. Her sixth sense is very strong. She's very observant. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to detect my well-concealed arrogance. She's a talent. June Moxie pondered for a moment. Then, he suddenly smiled in a strange manner. If Sun Xiaomei and Tang Yuan, then wouldn't I have another capable helper? Sun Xiaomei got up and walked over to Tang Yuan. Then, she suddenly kicked his fat buttocks. "Don't pretend to be dead. Quickly get up and come home with me. My father wants to see you." Tang Yuan howled and jumped up, his hands rubbing his buttocks as he angrily cursed. "Crazy bitch. Don't come near me. Who wants to go home with you? You can do whatever you want, but don't look for me." Sun Xiaomei's complexion became serious. She suddenly reached out and grabbed Tang Yuan's fat ears. Then, she dragged him out of the room. Tang Yuan kept on cursing and yelling. Then, he kept on begging for mercy. Finally, he gradually disappeared from the room. The only people left in the hall were the hitman June and the blushing Duga Xiaoi, who were deep in thought. Duga Xiaoi was very shy. She had never thought that her elder sister, Sun Xiaomei, would sell herself out. Moreover, she had done it in front of June Moxie. Moreover, she had bluntly said it out loud. This was too shameful. She and June Moxie were the only ones left. She wanted to run away out of shame, but she was reluctant to leave. She had finally met this enemy. So, how could she leave in a hurry? The whole family was guarding against this matter like a thief. If she left today, she didn't know when she would be able to see him again. This enemy is like a block of wood. I don't know what he's thinking. He doesn't even want to talk to me. It was a pity that June Mo didn't care about the little girl at this time. He kept repeating Sun Xiaomei's last words in his heart. It doesn't matter how much capital you have. It doesn't matter how proud and arrogant you are. But it's best that you put away your arrogance for now. After all, now is not the time for you to be arrogant. To June Mo, these words were like a morning bell, deafening and deafening. He had brought along the powerful memories and skills of his previous life. He had also brought along a powerful magical weapon to accompany him. Now, he had obtained an extremely powerful cultivation technique. Moreover, although his soul had transmigrated, the incomparable arrogance of the king of assassins from his previous life had also come with him. With so many advantages, why can't I be arrogant? Is there any reason why I can't be arrogant? In this world, whether it was Tian Xian or Shun Xian or even the Great Master, none of them were worthy of Jun Dashao's attention. In his heart, he had always believed that the people of this world were only SOSO, nothing more than this. How strong could they be? June Moxie's arrogance as a descendant of the Yellow Dragon had made him subconsciously think that he was above everyone else in this world. Moreover, he didn't care much about life and death. Therefore, he was even more arrogant than before. However, Sun Xiaomei's understated words today seemed to be unintentional. But it pointed out the biggest flaw in June Moxie's character, arrogance. Too arrogant. If he were to face an ordinary person, then he would be arrogant. After all, he was the only young master of the June family in Tianxiang City. So, he had the qualifications to be arrogant. And not many people could afford to provoke him. However, if he were to face an outsider from the Jianghu, then a debauchee from the capital city wouldn't have the qualifications. especially now that the Silver Blizzard City and the Shui Manor thought that a mere young master of the June family wasn't a big deal in their eyes. In fact, they wouldn't even care if they killed him. It seemed that he needed to sort out his mentality and put away some of his unnecessary arrogance. Just as he was thinking about this, he heard Dugu Xiao. He let out a hump sound. Her buttocks dragged the stool and turned around. Then she let out another hump sound and turned around again. Then she turned around a few times, and her pretty face became more and more gloomy. Her small hands were rubbing Little White, and Little White was squealing in pain. "Are there worms under your butt?" June Moxie asked in a puzzled manner. "Why is this little girl twisting around like a maggot?" "There are worms under your butt," Dugu Xiaoyi shouted. "You're ignoring me. You're not talking to me. You hate me." Dugu Xiaoyi angrily pouted and stamped her feet. The more she thought about it, the more she felt wronged. This guy is ignoring me and has left me hanging for so long, and now he's saying such a thing. June Moxie was stunned. I don't know why this young lady is so angry. June Moxie was at his wits' end in the face of such girlish sentiments. He couldn't help but become impatient and said, "What's wrong with you? If you don't talk, then I'll leave." "You." Dugu Xiaoyi felt bitter for a long time. She bit her lip and restrained her temper. Then she whispered, "You've caused me so much trouble, and now you want to leave? Trouble?" June Moxie opened his eyes wide. "What trouble did I cause you?" He thought, "If you're talking about trouble, then you're the one causing me trouble, right? Why are you inverting right and wrong? Look at Little White. It's been turning my house upside down these past few days." Dugu Xiao bit her lips, a level 8 iron winged panther cub. "This is something that has never been seen since ancient times. But it has appeared in my house. Isn't this a huge problem? The people of the capital have gone to see it these past few days, and they've clicked their tongues in wonder. My father and I wanted to beat someone up. This was indeed a problem. But June Moxie didn't have any way to deal with it." "What did your father say?" "My father became anxious and said, 'How do I know what's going on?' You're asking me, but who am I supposed to ask? I'm also puzzled. How about I give each of you a knife, and you go to the underworld to look for its parents and ask them." Dugu Xiaoyi imitated Dugu Wudi's words to perfection. She couldn't help but laugh as she spoke. June Moxie didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "I'll give you a knife, and I'll send you to hell to see the scenery. Then I'll come back, okay?" I don't understand how that Dugu Wudi could think of such a thing. And he even said it so confidently. Genius. I've finally completed it. I'll say the same thing again. I'll do my best, and I'll have no regrets about victory or defeat. As a writer, writing is my duty. I've done my part, and that's good enough. I've written at least 2 chapters this month. So far, I've written no less than 10 chapters. I've also written more than 70 chapters. I've written 230,000 characters by the end of this month. I'm very satisfied with this number. Many of my brothers have a monthly ticket in their hands. Perhaps they're waiting for me to erupt. I'm afraid that I won't be able to erupt at the end of the month. I can only say that I've done my best. I ask for everyone's forgiveness. Thank you. Chapter 240. Your father is a genius. His idea is very creative. June Moxie exclaimed in admiration. However, he was secretly cursing in his heart. Even if someone is willing to die for a righteous cause and find Little White's parents in the Yellow Springs, I reckon that they won't be able to get an answer from them. After all, the little thing's current situation had already surpassed the scope of the iron-winged leopard's history. Even the ancestor of the iron-winged leopard, or the strongest iron-winged leopard in history, wouldn't be able to explain the little thing's current situation. He then looked at the little girl in front of him. This little girl is also a first-class talent. Her temperament is very unique. She was angry with me a moment ago. In fact, her eyes seemed to be misty. But she started to smile as soon as she thought of something fun. In fact, she didn't even have to turn her tears into a smile. She's very adorable. I also thought so. Those people who wanted to take advantage of me ran away faster than anything else when my father said that. Everyone wants to take advantage of me. But No one is interested in taking advantage of me if I can't even exchange my life for it. Haha. Dugu Xiao Yi smiled proudly. I thought that I would have to spend a lot of effort to fabricate a flawless life for you. But I didn't expect that I wouldn't even need to use it. My father has a brain. In my mother's words, great wisdom appears to be stupidity. He has a hidden talent. Great wisdom appears to be stupidity. Intellect. These two words can be used to describe great General Dugu Wudi. It's such a pity. Then, are we going to deal with this matter? Jun Moxie was somewhat moved in his heart. No matter what, this little girl was purely thinking for his own good. She didn't want to expose herself. As for Dugu Wudi, he was a complete barbarian. So, he had solved the problem by accident. Well, it's over for the time being. Dugu Xiaoyi nodded. There were a lot of people who wanted to buy Little White at high price, but I drove them away. Little White is mine, and no one can touch it. Besides, it is our witness. The little girl's voice became lower and lower, and only she could hear the last sentence. Anyway, Jun Daxiao couldn't hear it. After saying that, Dugu Xiaoyi paused for a moment before turning her head to look at Jun Moxie. In a low voice, she said, "Our family received an invitation from your Jun family yesterday." Oh. Jun Moxie raised his eyebrows. "If I hadn't accepted the invitation, I wouldn't have known that you made such a big bet with my father." Dugu Xiaoyi was a little worried and angry. She glared at him and said, "You really dare to gamble. I really don't know what you're thinking. What kind of wine costs 10,000 taels of silver per jar? This was something that should never have happened. And you humph." My father laughed when he received the invitation and said that he would be able to fix you. Oh, by the way, did my father force you to make this bet? Can't fix me? Huh, what are you talking about? That's not it. This bet is about you invite me. Besides, this young master has a lofty and unyielding character. So, how could anyone force me? Jun Moxie touched his chin, and a trace of light flashed in his eyes. General Dugu certainly didn't force me. After all, I was the one who created this inexplicable bet. Fix me? Who will fix whom in the end? That's hard to say. Jun Daxiao didn't forget that the Dugu family would owe him an astronomical amount of debt once he successfully auctioned the wine. But what will General Dugu use to reduce his debt? Are you sure? Dugu Xiaoyi looked at him. Her eyes were full of anxiety. It was clear that this little girl didn't want Jun Moxie to lose to her father. So, she would rather her father lose. It'll be very ugly if he loses. How can you make such an unfair bet with my father? It's hard to say whether it's fair or not. Jun Moxie paused 3 times as he spoke in a very serious manner. His plan was absolutely foolproof. So, it wouldn't be unfair to Jun Daxiao, even if it was unfair. However, there was still a possibility that he would lose in case these idiots from another world didn't buy it. After all, there was still a chance in a million. How about I come with my father tomorrow? The expression in Dugu Xiaoyi's eyes fluctuated. She suddenly lowered her head and gritted her teeth. She had made up her mind. I'll cry if he makes things difficult for you. I'll make trouble for him. I won't let him bully you. You can rest assured. It was said that girls were extroverted. It was indeed true. The little girl's mind was now filled with Jun Moxie. No matter what, she couldn't let brother Imo Xia lose. However, she had completely forgotten that if her father lost, her family would immediately be burdened with a heavy debt. That was not a small amount of money. Jun Moxie's heart warmed again. For the first time in his life, there was a hint of gentleness in his usually calm, callous, and almost cold-blooded eyes. Jun Imo Xia wasn't an idiot. So, how could he not feel that the little girl was so pure and innocent? She was wholeheartedly thinking about him. Jun Imo Xia wasn't a fool. So, how could he not feel it? Humans weren't plants or trees. How could they be emotionless? Little girl, don't worry. I won't be at a disadvantage. Jun Moxie smiled warmly. He stretched out his hand and gently stroked Dugu Xiaoyi's beautiful hair. He withdrew his hand as if he had been electrocuted. Subconsciously, he still felt that being intimate with a woman was not in line with his identity as an assassin. He had lived 2 lives, but this was the first time he had such a subtle feeling. Although his identity in this life wasn't an assassin, June Moxie blushed and smiled. He stood up and said softly, "I'm leaving." Dugu Xiaoyi lowered her head. Her heart was thumping wildly. This was the first time that he had touched her on his own. Although it was only a small strand of hair, Dugu Xiaoyi still felt that her whole body was a little weak. Her face was also a little hot. "I'm already like this. Why are you like this now? What do you want me to do for you to be like this? You're really a blockhead." However, she vaguely felt that there was something unusual about this meeting. This time, when she saw Jun Daxiao again, this kid wasn't as slippery as before. He wasn't as pretentious and frivolous as before. On the contrary, he seemed to have a lot on his mind. His every move also seemed to be very steady. "Oh," Dugu Xiaoyi responded softly. She lowered her head and stood up. She looked at her toes. Her voice became so low that it was almost inaudible. Only Jun Daxiao, who was closer to her, could barely hear her. "Are you leaving now?" I'm fine." The little girl originally wanted to say, "It's not easy for me to see you once." However, she swallowed the words several times in her mouth. These words were too shameful. She considered them again and again, but ultimately didn't say them. Dugu Xiaoyi's face looked like a translucent white jade under the sunlight. It was soft and smooth, and could even be broken by a gentle breeze. A gentle breeze swept in from outside the window and gently danced in the wind. Strands of her hair fluttered on her cheeks, and her exquisite nose, her long eyelashes quietly drooped. She would occasionally blink twice if she was startled. Her bright red lips were full and moist. She would gently bite her pearly white teeth, and her face was full of reluctance. A young girl's feelings for love had just begun to open her heart, but the more she tried to hide it, the more adorable she became. This astonishing beauty made Jun Mo stare blankly. He had seen many famous stars in his previous life. What kind of beautiful women hadn't he seen? However, it was the first time in his life that he had seen such a pure beauty like this little lass. Jun Mo couldn't help but feel an irrepressible sense of affection in his heart. For the first time, a thought sprouted in his mind. This little girl is so beautiful. I believe that she's not inferior to any other beautiful woman. For a moment, the hall was so quiet that even the sound of a pin dropping could be heard. Only the sound of the two people's breathing could be heard. It was a little too quiet. It seemed as if Dugu Xiaoyi could feel Jun Moxie's burning gaze on her. Her pretty face became redder and redder. She couldn't help but draw circles on the ground with her toes. Her small hands stroked little white's smooth fur. Dugu Xiaoyi felt as if she was floating in the clouds. She felt as if she and Jun Moxie were the only two people left in the world. They were facing each other. Little White sneezed after a long time. It woke the two people up and broke the silence. Dugu Xiaoyi's face turned red. She slightly raised her head and shyly glanced at Jun Moxie. She then whispered, "Idiot, didn't you want to leave? Why haven't you left? Are you stupid?" Jun Mo suddenly realized that he had lost his composure. In fact, he had even lost his mind. This was the first time he had made such a big mistake in his two lives. So, he quickly composed himself and laughed. "I almost didn't want to leave after seeing such a beautiful little girl. I would have turned into a pervert if you hadn't woken me up." Dugu Xiaoyi snorted. She slightly rolled her eyes at him and whispered, "You're such a pervert. Do you think I'm afraid of a pervert like you? Since you have things to do, then go and do them." She turned around. Jun Moxie could clearly see that Dugu Xiaoyi's nape had turned red after she had finished speaking. "What's the big deal with those words? Why are you so shy?" Jun Daxiao had rarely been close to women in his two lives. So, how could he know what was on his daughter's mind? Dugu Xiaoyi was startled to realize that her tone was very much like that of a gentle wife. She was gently exhorting her husband to go out to do some work. She recalled that her mother would always use the same tone every time her father went out to battle. She couldn't help but feel ashamed in her heart. These words, "It's as if I'm this kid's. Who am I? Who am I?" The more she thought about it, the redder her face became. She didn't dare to raise her delicate little head again. "Ha ha, beautiful, very beautiful. Jun Moxie exclaimed in admiration. He suddenly reached out and touched Dugu Xiaoyi's pretty little face. He gently pinched it and exclaimed in admiration, "So smooth, so fragrant, haha." His clothes fluttered in the wind, and the sound of his footsteps gradually faded away. Hitman Jun pretended to be frivolous to cover up the panic in his heart. He almost ran away in defeat and found that his heart was beating like a drum for the first time. I had a checkup this morning. Alas, food poisoning and influenza. My luck is really bad. I won 2 prizes in one go. Chapter 241. Dugu Xiaoyi's heart was thumping wildly. She touched her cheek with one hand, feeling extremely shy. The next moment, she suddenly thought of something and said, "I'll go see you tomorrow." Her voice was very low, and she still didn't dare to raise her head. She didn't know if that enemy heard her or not. "Okay, I'll wait for you tomorrow." Jun Daxiao's clear voice drifted with the wind and passed into the beautiful girl's ears. When the little girl raised her head, that handsome figure had already disappeared in front of her. Dugu Xiaoyi hurriedly got up and ran 2 steps to the door of the hall. She looked up and saw that that person was riding on a tall horse. He had just turned the corner of the street. His phoenix eyes were full of longing and intoxication. He looked like he was dreaming as he looked at the empty street. His face was full of a dreamy smile with a faint blush, which was indescribably moving. "That bad guy Humph. He actually pinched my face just now. Why didn't I pinch him? This young lady, Humph, I'll definitely find him tomorrow. I'll definitely kick his, but a few times." Dugu Xiaoyi snorted happily. She tried her best to show an angry look, but her eyes couldn't help but curve like a crescent moon, revealing the true contentment of her master's shyness and happiness. Jun Moxie was single and leisurely returning home. He only felt an indescribable joy in his heart. It was a joy that he had never experienced in his 2 lives. His brain even felt a little dizzy. He obviously didn't drink, but he felt slightly tipsy. He obviously didn't hear any funny jokes, and he didn't want to laugh, but the corners of his mouth pulled up into a gentle smile. Bad bird. Could it be that I've been poisoned by this girl? Love is like a poisonous wine. Once you drink it, you'll never get the antidote. Oh, this is really a headache. In this world, although this body has been adjusted, but the physiological age seems to be just 16 years old. It should still be in the category of underage. In my previous life, it should be the 3rd year of middle school, or at most, it should be no more than a teenager in the 1st year of high school. It seems that the girl is only this old, or a little younger. This is pure puppy love. Damn it, puppy love is wrong. This is a super case where the teacher will look for the parents. Jun Daxiao's imagination ran wild all the way. His face was flushed with happiness, and the horse's hooves were hurried. The sound of the hooves was like that of a general returning from victory. He even felt that the hooves of the horse under him were especially melodious, as if he was writing a poem. Lightly dismounting from the horse, Jun Moxie stepped on the doorstep of his house with a face full of happiness, until a voice suddenly rang out, interrupting the happiness in his heart. In his heart, it was almost the wedding night. Everyone, please despise this guy. You can use recommendations, tips, monthly votes, 3,000 words to urge me to update, and so on. You don't have to give me face. Smash him to death. On one hand, he was thinking about puppy love, but on the other hand, he was thinking about the bridal chamber. Damn it. Brat, you're finally back. I've comprehended a few new moves today. Come and take a look at this, Brat. The solitary eagle jumped out in an excited voice that sounded like he was presenting a treasure. After studying for a few days, he had finally comprehended a move. The solitary eagle was very excited. Jun Daxiao, whose eyes were filled with the beauty of a flower and the moon, suddenly appeared in front of his eyes. His long hair fluttered in the wind, but he had a fiendish face that was as cold as ice. This contrast was really too big. Too big. Jun Daxiao frowned and looked at the supreme eagle who had disturbed his daydream unhappily. In his heart, he had an impulse to kick the supreme eagle. Although he really wanted to rush forward, he forcibly restrained himself. He couldn't afford to offend this guy for the time being. I'm not free. I'm annoyed. Don't mess with me. Jun Dashao frowned, and his face darkened. He took a step into his room and closed the door with a bang. Supreme Ing, who followed after him, almost got his nose stuck in the crack of the door. What's going on? I clearly saw that he came back with a smile on his face. He looked so happy that he was about to faint. How come he immediately turned into a bastard when I opened my mouth to speak? The solitary eagle scratched his head in bewilderment. Today was supposed to be a very ordinary day. But because an invitation card, it was no longer ordinary. The entire Tianxiang city was boiling over. It was boiling over. Anyone with a bit of status or a bit of wealth was discussing this aristocratic hall. What kind of place was it? How could it be so arrogant? It was a scalding silver invitation card with a golden plum blossom in full bloom on it. It was actually painted purely with the juice of melted gold. Every petal was vivid and lifelike, and even the stamens were clearly visible. Just this invitation card alone, even if it was just a cover, was already a valuable work of art. What was inside? The first thing that caught the eye when the title page was opened were 2 lines of inlaid golden characters. The first couplet read, "If you're destitute, please take another path." The second couplet read, "If you are worth millions, do not enter this door." The next page was a group of inlaid golden characters. It was truly a majestic sight. Great scholars talk and laugh. No commoners come and go. The refined men of the world are the best of the best. How can their basic necessities be mediocre? Playing the zither, reading the golden scriptures, listening to the celestial music, obtaining elegance. Tasting the heavenly tea, drinking the golden wine, one's life is not in vain. On the last page, there were only 8 big words. They were written in cursive script. What more could one ask for in life? The invitation clearly stated that anyone who wished to enter this door must be worth at least millions. This was undoubtedly a typical case of despising the poor and favoring the rich. Even the name was Aristocratic Hall. It was a name full of discrimination. But this vulgar and nouveau riche invitation card had the seals of 3 families on it. The Jun family's Jun Wui, 3rd Master Jun's personal seal. The Tang family's seal. The most surprising thing was that there was also the seal of the Tianxiang Empire's only prince. Just these 3 seals alone could be said to be able to suppress people to the point that they couldn't breathe. Who would dare not go? Even the Morong family and the Dugu family couldn't afford to provoke these 3 monstrous families if they were to join forces. The Tianxiang city's aristocratic circles were abuzz with discussions about this matter. It had only been a day, but it had already stirred up a storm of public opinion. In the beginning, everyone was quite critical. They thought that the aristocratic hall was being a little too reckless. They thought that they despised the poor and coveted the rich. However, the public opinion had completely flipped in the end. Some of the people who had received the invitation were sighing, but their faces were filled with pride, because many people were indignant. Why didn't I receive an invitation? My net worth is more than millions. This invitation clearly states that they want to capture all the rich and nobles of Tianxiang City in one fell swoop. But why isn't my name on it? Am I a head shorter than everyone else? Isn't this looking down on me? What kind of logic is this? So they felt wronged and unwilling. From private discussions to public complaints, the people who had received the invitation were frightened and apprehensive at first. Then they became proud and arrogant. Look, I'm a noble. I'm a great scholar. Do you understand? TSK, TSK. This is the evaluation of the Jun family, the Tang family, and the Wang family. Do you dare to disagree? What? You're richer than me? You have more money than me? Then, do you have an invitation? Identity, yeah. Identity, yeah. What proof of identity? It's very simple. You have an invitation. If you don't, then your net worth must be less than $1 million. Or perhaps you're just a commoner. This invitation had become the symbol of a noble's identity in a very short period of time. Some brothers would go out wearing pure white robes. They would directly insert the invitation card into their collar. They would walk around with an indifferent look on their faces. They would go wherever there were many people. They would hold their heads high and puff out their chests. They would walk with a swagger. They would look very cool. I'm a great scholar. I'm a great scholar. And I'm very rich. As for those who didn't have an invitation card, they were unwilling to be outdone. They racked their brains and tried every possible way to get one. They stared at those who seemed to be inferior to them, yet they could still bring an invitation card and show it off in front of them. Their eyes were burning with desire. Many people didn't leave their homes, but they would wantonly visit their relatives and friends after obtaining an invitation card. The most outrageous ones would visit more than 10 families in a single day. They would tire themselves out like dogs, but they still wouldn't get tired of it. This wasn't too outrageous, because there were even more outrageous cases. It could even be said that the consequences would be far-reaching. This invitation card had caused a storm in Tianxiang City. Even the creator of this event, Jun Mo Xie, hadn't expected it. So much so that some people even had the guts to request an audience with Jun Mo Xie. They were willing to spend a lot of money in order to get an invitation card. Jun Wui didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He had to beg his third uncle for help. This was too much. It had to be said that this world had always had a strict hierarchy. But there had never been such a blatant and brazen act like this. The aristocratic hall had been created. Who didn't want to be famous in this world? Now that there was such a great opportunity to be above others, who wouldn't scramble like a flock of ducks? It was like two women in modern society. Even if they both wore the same gold ring, they would still intentionally or unintentionally compare which one was bigger and which one was smaller. Not to mention, the entire Tianxiang city's aristocratic circle had been stirred up by such a huge storm. The aristocratic hall, which was right across from the magnificent jewel hall, had immediately attracted the attention of the entire upper class of Tianxiang City. This auction house hadn't even opened yet, but it had already caused countless people to anxiously look forward to it. This was the first time such a sensation had occurred in Tianxiang City. Early in the morning, Dongfang shone the first rays of light. The doors of the aristocratic hall quietly opened. Two teams of bodyguards came out in a line and stood in two neat rows at the main entrance. What greeted everyone's eyes was a courtyard full of fresh greenery. Bursts of fragrant flowers filled the air. Anyone who smelled it would feel intoxicated. Looking further inside, it was even more refreshing. Even the most picky person would be intoxicated by it and would be unable to extricate themselves from it. Even in such a late autumn season, the courtyard was filled with flowers and plants. It was as if it was the height of spring. The huge courtyard was filled with all kinds of flowers and plants. Only a very elegant path was left in the middle of the courtyard. It seemed to be somewhat curved, and under the shade of the flowering trees on both sides, it seemed to have a transcendent feel to it. The winding and small path was only a few feet long, but it gave people a feeling that they couldn't see the end of it. Just based on this point alone, it was already something that no other place could compare to. This was worthy of being called the aristocratic hall. Chapter 242. Today's explosive first update. 20 minutes after the second update, a faint sound of stringed instruments could be heard coming from the upper floor of the aristocratic hall. It was indistinct and seemed to be near. It seemed as if it was coming from the clouds. It seemed as if it was the music of the nine heavens. It was faintly discernible and couldn't be heard clearly. However, this indistinct and faintly discernible sound made it even more captivating. This indescribable grace made all the people who had received the invitation cards rejoice. Regardless of the outcome of the auction, they would still be able to reap the rewards of attending this event. As for those who didn't have an invitation card in their hands, they felt an unbearable itch in their hearts. It was such an elegant place, such a noble district, but he hated himself for lacking that invitation. Without that pass, he wouldn't be able to stand in that graceful place. What a pity. No, he had to get a pass even if he had to pay a sky-high price in the future. He had to get one. He had to. The price of the aristocratic hall's invitation cards had risen to a frightening height within a few days. It could even be said that paper was expensive in Luoyang. This had opened the eyes of Fatty Tang. They had been distressed by the fact that he had spent a lot of money on these invitations. But now, He looked up at the young Master June with incomparable admiration. Isn't this the definition of a business genius? I'm still too short-sighted. Fatty Tang laughed at himself. In fact, the young Master June hadn't expected such a sensation. This could only mean that there were a lot of rich people in Tianxiang City. Moreover, people's desire to compare themselves with others was too crazy. The sun was shining brightly. The guests invited by the aristocratic hall had also arrived. The main road was filled with extremely luxurious carriages in a short period of time. One after another, the carriages were parked next to each other. It was hard to say which carriage was more luxurious, but it was impossible to tell which carriage was more luxurious. Every person who received an invitation would bring out their best carriage and ornaments that could show off their noble status. They did not hesitate to spend a lot of money to hang them on the carriage. The rich and powerful had gathered as far as the eye could see. Fatty's analogy was the most appropriate. Are these people still human? They're like a moving mountain of gold. Even a piece of meat from each of them would be enough for an ordinary person to live for several lifetimes. Two cultured and elegant young men in white and two pure and beautiful young girls in white stood at the door, acting as the welcoming public relations. After inspecting the invitations in the hands of the guests, he waved his hand, and a white-robed young man immediately came out to receive the invitations and warmly welcomed the guests in. None of the three families who signed their names on the invitation cards were familiar faces. They only arranged for their servants to welcome them. However, everyone who had their invitation verified did not feel disobedient. Instead, they felt honored, glorious, and proud. This was more reasonable. If the three great families really sent their own people to welcome them, it would be lowering their own statuses. It would be very inappropriate. Almost every guest had their heads held high and their chests puffed out, looking calm and unruffled. Regardless of whether they really had such a mentality or were just trying their best to look like that, they all walked with their feet splayed out and glanced at the crowd outside, who were so anxious that their veins were popping out because they didn't have invitations. They accepted the arrangement in a reserved manner, walked in elegantly, and disappeared among the lush flowers and trees. Everyone who had received an invitation card came without exception. They came in an endless stream, but everyone had their own status. When there were a lot of people, these people who usually refused to submit to anyone would instead give way to each other to show their magnanimity. They were nobles, so shouldn't they have some noble demeanor? Not to mention anything else. If they weren't magnanimous and modest, how could they be worthy of the title of great scholar? In the palace, someone was laughing loudly. In this world, there is only one person who could laugh so unbridledly in the palace. Even the concubines in the harem, or even the empress, who was the mother of the world, would have to pay attention to etiquette and not laugh so heartily. Even the most favored princes and princesses would have to pay attention to etiquette and not be disrespectful in front of others. In this way, it went without saying who this unbridled laughing person was. The emperor of the Tianxiang Empire held a white chess piece in his hand as he muttered to himself. Then he laughed loudly and said, "This is a wonderful move, and the method is also extraordinarily ingenious. I don't know who came up with such a wonderful idea. I didn't think that there would be someone in my Tianxiang who would be able to create clouds and rain with a flip of his hand. Ha, not bad, not bad, not bad at all." In front of him was a man of unknown age. His clothes were as white as snow, and his stature was tall and straight. Even though he was just sitting, his shoulders were straight, and he had an awe-inspiring appearance. His jet black hair was draped over his back, and his beard fluttered in front of his chest. However, there wasn't a single wrinkle on his face, and it was even whiter and smoother than a young lady's face. The man looked at the chessboard and said, "This move is indeed wonderful." No matter how wonderful that person's wine is, even if it's hard to find in the heavens or on the earth, it can't really be worth 10,000 silvers per jug. However, this kind of method is bound to arouse the competitiveness of the various races in the capital. Not only can it be sold for 10,000 silvers, but it can even be sold for more than that. This is indeed a good idea. But as His Majesty has said, a flip of the hand can summon clouds, and another can summon rain. This person is still not qualified enough. Is that all? His Majesty smiled meaningfully. He placed a chess piece and said with a smile, "In my opinion, not so." "Your Majesty, what do you mean?" The white-robed man looked at the chessboard as he asked. He didn't seem to be very respectful to this supreme being in front of him. "In my opinion, the ingenuity of this move is secondary to the ingenuity of selling wine. More importantly, this scheme far exceeds that of an ordinary person's. It really makes me gasp in amazement." The emperor gently stroked his beard and said solemnly, "This plan seems simple. Almost anyone can do it as long as they can think of it. But if you think about it carefully, that's not the case. I'd like to hear the details." The white-robed man was interested as well. He raised his eyebrows and looked like he wanted to know more. "If you want to come up with this plan, you must first understand people's hearts and understand their weaknesses. This is especially true for the psychology of the rich and powerful. You must study them thoroughly and not miss out on any detail. Everyone in the world loves fame. Whether it's a master, a poor scholar, or even a scoundrel or a beggar, all of them are like this. As long as one can grasp this point, one will be able to grasp the weakness of people's hearts. No matter who it is, they can do whatever they want in the court and not fall. However, for this plan, this is only a foundation, a prelude." The emperor's eyes showed a trace of worry, but also a trace of admiration. This person must be a master who understands people's hearts and understands human nature. The emperor made his first conclusion. Secondly, as long as these people go in today, they will not come out empty-handed. And the only auction item inside was wine. Therefore, no matter how trashy the wine was, no matter how unpalatable it was, no one who went in would come out empty-handed. Plus, they will auction it at a high price. No one will buy it at a low price. No one will care about a few thousand taels of silver. They care more about their reputation. The emperor's lips curled into a mocking smile, because there are too many people outside who didn't receive an invitation. They are waiting to be amazed or ridiculed. As long as one received an invitation to enter, no one would be willing to lose face, and no one could afford to lose it. So, this person came up with this plan. He is openly taking money from the pockets of all the families. Everyone is so happy that they are fighting to be the first. They are afraid that others will look down on them. Using tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of taels of silver to buy face in front of all the nobles in the capital. Anyone who understands this deal will know how to choose. This person can be said to be fully deserving of his title as an expert at accumulating wealth. Unfortunately, he didn't have the chance to meet him. The emperor made his second conclusion. The man in white was still sitting in front of him. He was listening quietly. His face was expressionless. He didn't respond at all. Thirdly, have you paid attention to the contents of this name list? If you look at it carefully, you will know that although this name list has almost all the large clans in it, there's a very interesting phenomenon in the levels between them. This list is not complete. Every industry has its own competitors, and those rich families also have their own competitors. Plus, they're usually on par with their competitors. That is how they can maintain the prosperity of an industry. This is the balance that I have managed to maintain after changing the laws many times. The prices of goods won't skyrocket, and the people won't have a living. The prices of goods won't skyrocket, and the merchants won't make a profit either. However, this person's list has, intentionally or unintentionally, broken the balance that I have worked so hard to maintain for so many years. It doesn't leave any traces. Even if people want to blame him, they can't. Hearing this, the man in white looked confused. It was obvious that he didn't understand. Hee. The emperor laughed. You see, the Sun family, the Mu family, and the Zhao family are the most famous among the salt merchants in the capital. The Zhao family is the most powerful among them. They're slightly stronger than the other two families. The Sun family and the Mu family are admittedly weaker. However, they often join forces to resist the strongest Zhao family. Therefore, the three families are able to maintain a balance. However, this list only invites the Zhao family. The other two families aren't invited. In fact, everyone knows that the other two families are also worth hundreds of millions. So, why didn't they receive an invitation? However, no one can blame the person in charge of the aristocratic hall. That's because he invited the most representative of the salt merchants, the Zhao family. As for the other industries, they're profitable and profitable. They basically use the same method. They only invite the most powerful and representative of the three families. The anxiety in the emperor's eyes deepened. Moreover, they add fuel to the fire with such powerful propaganda. I'm afraid that the conflicts between these families will quickly intensify in a very short time. Those who receive an invitation will become more and more arrogant. Those who don't receive an invitation will become angry. They will feel that they are being pushed aside. They will feel that they are inferior. So the chaos will begin. Chapter 243. This man's scheme is admittedly for the sake of wealth. But the amount of wealth he's plotting is enormous. It's a soul-stirring, astronomical figure. So it can't be taken lightly. Other than that, with all the great clans gathered together, something will definitely happen. I believe that even if nothing happens, this person will still deliberately create trouble. Only by making the situation chaotic will it be easier for him to reap benefits from the chaos. And he'll be able to take advantage of today's conflict in the future. And he'll be able to make decisions that will benefit him in the future. The emperor stood up and started to pace back and forth. He sighed after a long while and muttered, "It's a pity that such a talent could be of use to me. This man is formidable, but he still needs the support of the three big families in order to stir up such a huge storm. And it won't be easy for him to stir up the storm without the support of the Jun and Tang families. Moreover, he also has the help of the prince equivalent, the white-robed man consoled. You've just mentioned a crucial point, and this is what I'm worried about. This man was able to persuade the three families to help him. So, it's obvious that he has a good relationship with them. And that relationship is certainly not shallow. There was a rumor that the wine being sold today was the result of a bet between the third young master of the Jun family, Jun Moxie, and the great general Dugawudi. But I don't quite believe that this scheme was devised by that brat, Jun Moxie. But I'll have to look at him in a new light if it's really that debauchee's idea." The emperor chuckled a few times, but he couldn't hide the worry on his face. He asserted, "Someone else must have come up with this scheme, but he's an outstanding talent no matter who he is. And it doesn't matter what this man's original intention was. He's going to stir up chaos." The emperor frowned for a while. Then he suddenly smiled and said, "But this auction will be very interesting no matter what. Mr. Wen, would you be interested in accompanying me?" "Your Majesty, are you tempted?" The white-robed Mr. Wen raised his head and looked at the emperor. His eyes were as clear as the water of a clear lake. They didn't have the slightest bit of impurities. This pair of eyes seemed to be the eyes of a newborn baby. "This matter is interesting. This person is talented and dangerous. Shouldn't I be moved by such an interesting matter?" His Majesty narrowed his eyes. "Moreover, this matter will have a far-reaching impact on the situation in the capital. How can I not join in the fun? It's good to broaden my horizons. I also want to have a taste and see what kind of wine is worth 10,000 taels of silver per jar." Mr. Wen stood up in a free and easy manner. His smooth, baby-like face revealed an innocent smile. He chuckled and said, "In that case, this old man will accompany your Majesty on this trip. With teacher by my side, it's absolutely foolproof." The emperor laughed. As they spoke, they walked out. "However, we still need to find someone to bring us there. We don't have an invitation. It is reported that the three princes and Her Royal Highness Princess Raimu have been invited. Your Majesty wants to go with the princess?" Mr. Wen blinked his eyes. The two of them smiled in tacit understanding. "At the same time, I'll take a look at how my three sons fight openly and covertly. This journey should be very interesting. No matter what, something has to happen, right?" The emperor smiled deeply. Wrinkles appeared on his face as he smiled. Then he asked, Brother Zhu hasn't eaten anything for the past few days? Is he feeling better? Mr. Wen walked shoulder to shoulder with the emperor. He didn't shy away from being a step behind. Then he smiled and said, It's time to change his bad habit. But that grandson of Tang, Wanli, is too incompetent. He was scared to the point of wetting his pants. And little Zhu's timing was just too coincidental. He deserved to be clean for half of his life. But he was pulled on his mouth. He addressed Zhu as little Zhu. It seemed that his status was at least one generation higher than Zhu and the others. But he looked much younger than Dugawudi. In fact, he was at most the same age as Junwui. This was very strange. Ha ha! His Majesty laughed. Then he turned to the old eunuch and said, Tell the Imperial Kitchen to go to the Imperial Hospital. Tell them to prepare some appetizers for Eunuch Zhu. How can he not eat and drink every day? The old eunuch respectfully complied. He was the emperor's personal attendant. He had accompanied the emperor for 30 years. So, he understood the meaning behind these words. First, Zhu's matter needed to be conveyed by him. Second, His Majesty didn't want him to follow. So he withdrew. His Majesty smiled as he watched the old eunuch withdraw. He then said, I haven't left the palace in disguise for a long time. I really miss those days. Your Majesty will personally take action. I'm sure that the mastermind who's plotting in secret won't be able to hide. Mr. Wen smiled elegantly and said, Perhaps your Majesty will obtain a great talent because of this auction. This one congratulates your Majesty in advance. I hope so. His Majesty smiled faintly, but the expression in his eyes fluctuated. There was a faint trace of doubt in his eyes. He muttered a name, but didn't say it aloud. However, the shape of his mouth indicated that he was constantly muttering the name Junwui. A cold light flashed in his eyes. The sun gradually rose. The big families had finally arrived one after another. The Dugu family was the first to arrive. They were known as the most tyrannical and barbaric family in the capital. 8 tall horses had arrived. All of them were valiant and high-spirited. They were surrounding a light green palanquin. The Dugu family's lord, Dugu Di, was leading the heroes and legends rushing forward. His 7 nephews had arrived in unison. They looked like 8 majestic bears who had smelled the fragrance of honey in high spirits. The large group of people arrived in front of the door and stopped in unison. The light green door of the palanquin opened, and a graceful, slim, and pretty figure gracefully walked out. Her eyebrows were like distant mountains, and her eyes were like spring water. Her almond-shaped eyes and rosy cheeks were like a painting. She had the charm of 100 beauties. Her charm revealed the purity and beauty of a young girl in the prime of her youth. This person was one of Tianxiang City's 2 peerless beauties, Dugu Xiaoi. Jun Moxie's eyes would have been wide open if he were here. This graceful, gentle, and stunning beauty. Is this the violent little girl who screams about killing people every day? This transformation was too big. It was a super transformation. The arrival of the Dugu family had finally attracted the attention of a very important person from the Jun family. Junwoo was sitting upright in his wheelchair at the end of the flower-filled path. He was dressed in a plain green robe. His chiseled face had a faint smile on it, which made him look very graceful. He was being pushed by a white-clothed youngster as he slowly made his way forward. Brother Dugu. Junwoo cupped his hands in greeting. His eyes revealed a trace of warmth. You've arrived. Third brother. Dugu jumped off his horse and strode forward. The Jun family is leading the opening of this business. How can I not show my support? How can I trouble third brother to personally welcome me? I'll go on myself. We're not strangers. It doesn't matter. In the vast capital, only brother Dugu is worthy of me, Junwoo, personally coming out to welcome you. Since brother Dugu has come, how can I neglect you? Junwoo smiled. His eyes were full of profound meaning as he stretched out his hand. Brother Dugu, please. Dugu expression changed as soon as he heard the words Brother Dugu. His eyes flashed with ecstasy as he cupped his fists. Third brother Jun, please." He stretched out his hand and pushed aside the white-clothed youth who was pushing the wheelchair behind Jun Wooey. Then he laughed and said, "You go rest. I'll push my third brother inside." Jun Wooey leaned back comfortably and allowed Dugawudi to push his wheelchair. Dugawudi pointed out the route they should take, and the atmosphere was very harmonious. Suddenly, the two of them felt a little touched in their hearts. Could it be that the years that had passed by have returned? Dugawudi laughed heartily. His heart was filled with joy. However, his tiger-like eyes were suddenly filled with tears. He pretended to lower his head and quietly wiped them away. His blood was boiling in his heart, and he couldn't help but cry out in his heart, "Brother Wu Hui, third brother, little brother has forgiven me. He has called me Brother Dugu again today. I'm so happy. I'm so happy." The two of them hadn't spoken a single word for the past 10 years. They hadn't mentioned anything that had happened in the past 10 years either. But the grudges and estrangement of the past 10 years had completely melted away in a single sentence. The two of them were happily chatting and laughing. But everyone could feel that there was a thick layer of sadness shrouding these two all-powerful generals. It was a bloody sadness. This was the tacit understanding between iron-blooded soldiers. If there was enmity between them, they would return it with a sword. If there was enmity between them, they would let it go with a smile. 10 years of vicissitudes had changed. But today a smile had erased all enmity. It was only a change in the way they addressed each other. But the enmity between these two peerless generals had been dispelled. The 7 strong men of the Dugu family didn't utter a single word at this moment. In fact, they didn't have their usual fiery temperament. Instead, they were extremely quiet. Even their usual heavy breathing had been restrained. It was as if they were afraid to disturb these two brothers who had survived hundreds of battles. That was because they were carrying the glory of the entire military and the entire Tianxiang Empire on their shoulders. The little girl Dugu Xiaoyi's eyes turned red. She couldn't help but sob in a low voice. The little girl was young, so it was difficult for her to understand the special camaraderie between comrades in arms. But she was Dugawudi's only daughter, so she understood what her father had been tangled up in his heart all these years. Dugawudi had been careless throughout his life, but he had never been careless about one thing. He had never been careless about it. Jun Wu Hui. Every year on Jun Wu Hui's birthday and death, Dugawudi would drink himself into a stupor. Then, this extremely tough and unyielding man would burst into tears without any regard for his manners. He would cry to his heart's content without any attempt to conceal it. He would cry until his liver and intestines were cut into pieces. Dugawudi had rarely shed tears in his life, but they were all for the sake of his dead sworn brother. Many times, Dugu Xiaoyi would see Dugawudi sitting alone in his study room. Dugawudi would sigh as he caressed the sword that Jun Wu Hui had given him. But today, Jun Wui's words had completely unraveled the knot in Dugawudi's heart. How could Dugu Xiaoyi not be happy? How could she not cry? How could she not be moved to tears? After the Dugu family, another big family arrived, the Song family. Then, the Tang family, the Li family, and the Meng family arrived one after another. The magnificent Jewel Hall, which was only a street away, had also received an invitation. Xiao Han and Mu Shuetong were dressed in their usual white robes. They were accompanied by the flower-like Han Yinming. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.